Chapter 461, Surveillance. Understood, my lord, Hogg nodded. After rigorous training, his stealth tracking skills had become highly professional, even earning Anduin's recognition. Anduin nodded, feeling confident in Hogg's abilities. He then pointed to another red dot on the map. This is the Fire Ash Snake, a short spear in the Silver Spear. Judging by its current location, it should be at the headquarters. This aligns with our intelligence. This individual is responsible for the defense of the headquarters, holds a high status, and is quite powerful. We'll ignore this person for now. In 2 days, during the Thunderbird safety period, I will infiltrate the headquarters as Thunderbird to gather more information. He then pointed to a third red dot. This is another short spear, codenamed Transformer Lizard. His duty is to exchange merits and evaluate newcomers. His current position is somewhere in West Germany. We still don't have detailed information on him, so Shaltir, you and Hogg will track him down. Your priority is to uncover his identity. Understood, sir. It's finally time for me to go out, Shaltir said excitedly, tossing her hair. She had been cooped up in Anduin's shop for the past 2 years and was eager for some action. Be careful not to be exposed. According to Thunderbird, these 3 are experts in charge of the headquarters. They are not only powerful, but also very loyal to the Rune Snake. They are diehards left over from the Saints Society. I suspect that although the shape-shaped lizard and fire ash snake are still short spears, they have likely already taken the elixir. Understood, I will be careful, Shaltir replied solemnly. She then glanced at the last red dot. My lord, didn't you say there are only 3 silver guns in Germany? Who is this other person? This person is the Spear Phoenix. I don't understand why she is here. She should be in charge of the French branch. Her appearance is unusual, Anduin said, puzzled. Phoenix was also a diehard and a core member of the Silver Spear. Besides handling French affairs, she was involved in the planning of the Silver Spear in Europe. Previously, she had planned to establish a transfer station in the UK with the Golden Snidget and other spears. Thunderbird and another spear, Black Dragon, were in charge of American affairs. Unfortunately, Thunderbird had been active in the United States for the past few years. Before fleeing with the Portkey, he returned to the Americas and stayed there to heal his injuries and gather strength. Therefore, Thunderbird was not very clear about the situation in Europe over the past few years. He didn't even know the details of the German division. Spears seldom contacted each other and usually managed their own affairs. Thunderbird had always been the #1 fighter in the club, rarely interfering with the club's plans, and was more responsible for actions. The reason Thunderbird went to the UK was that the British transit station was connected to the transportation routes of America and Europe, so the experienced Thunderbird was assigned to handle it. The Silver Spear, Bird Snake, killed by Moody on the island of Ireland a year ago, was a confidant of Phoenix. Bird Snake was sent by Phoenix to help Thunderbird establish a British transfer station, but ended up dying within 2 days of arriving in England. Phoenix had been in contact with Thunderbird for more than a year, trying to find out what happened in the UK and urging Thunderbird to continue the construction progress. Phoenix received a message from the irritable Thunderbird, who informed him that the advancement of British affairs had been hindered. The bird and snake had died in the siege of the British Ministry of Magic. Thunderbird mentioned that he was still figuring out a method to proceed, and their communication was quite strained. This was typical for the Silver Spears, as mutual trust among them was limited. Each member was an unruly and rebellious individual with explosive combat power. They only set goals for our club affairs and didn't concern themselves with the methods or time required to achieve them. As a result, Phoenix and the others knew little about the situation in America, and even less about Britain. Similarly, Thunderbird and Black Dragon were unaware of what Golden Snidget and Phoenix had accomplished in Europe. This lack of communication was beneficial for Anduin, as it helped him hide his identity. The club members wouldn't suspect him for not understanding the situation in Europe. However, it also meant he was blind to the situation in Germany and had to start from scratch. This Phoenix. Anduin pondered as he looked at the red dot representing the Phoenix. I will follow this Phoenix personally. You all are responsible for your own goals. Remember, your primary goal is your own safety. Don't expose yourselves. Report the situation immediately and gather at 12 o'clock tonight. Yes, my lord. Understood. After Hogg and Shaltir responded, they both disappeared. Anduin quickly gathered his equipment and vanished as well. He used apparition and maintained a phantom form to shuttle through the air. After being tempered by lightning, he had become more proficient in this technique and even tried using it in battle. His apparition was different from that of ordinary wizards. His body would completely turn into lightning, making him look like a humanoid made of electricity. While he would still disappear during long-distance teleportation, short-distance displacements left an afterimage of lightning. At 12 o'clock that night, in the room of Dudenglu Hotel, Anduin and Shaltir appeared one by one, but Hogg was nowhere to be seen. Where's Hogg's stupid dog? Did he forget the time again, or was he discovered and arrested? Shaltir sneered, clearly enjoying the thought. She knew Hogg must be fine, otherwise Anduin wouldn't be so calm. Hogg has made new discoveries about the target he was following and is still tracking them, Anduin explained casually. How about your side? Did you find anything? Shaltir immediately took out a few photos and handed them to Anduin. After a brief inspection, Anduin saw that most of them were of an old building. One photo showed a young wizard in his 30s, but he was mostly inside the old building, and the photos were taken through a window. This shape-shifting lizard stays in the room all day. I could only collect images when he passed by the window. I kept my distance to avoid being exposed. There are two pieces of information I can gather. First, this old building is likely his hiding place. Second, given his age, he has probably consumed the elixir, as it would be impossible to stay so young otherwise, Shaltir explained. Anduin nodded in agreement. Apart from the age of the silver spear gun, the other party's behavior was consistent with their expectations. In the shadows, the atmosphere was tense, reminiscent of a wizard who had drunk the elixir of life. This was very similar to the snake-shedding wizards that Anduin had learned about. Although they possessed outstanding abilities and strong combat effectiveness, they were filled with fear, terrified of their secrets, and their snake-shedding stage being discovered. Good job. Did you find out the real identity of the other party? Anduin praised Shaltir, even though she had only been on surveillance for a day. No, the neighbors around this guy are either empty houses or old people with slurred speech and blurred consciousness. It's impossible to find out the name the other party is using now. Even if we asked, it would likely be a pseudonym, Shaltir replied, shaking her head in boredom. She hopped onto the bed, clearly frustrated by the uneventful day spent staring at a broken house. She would have preferred playing with Hogg. Since that's the case, install a few magic cameras for surveillance near his residence. If the other party doesn't leave that position, there's no need to continue following, Anduin ordered. Well, I guess that guy won't leave his residence except for his mission. He's like a ghost, more eerie than us vampires. Shaltir pouted, then looked at Anduin again. My lord, how is your side? Have you gained anything? Anduin shook his head. My side is worse than yours. I haven't even seen anyone. The other party has been hiding in the room, and I can feel that they've cast a protective spell on the house, so I didn't dare to send monitoring spiders to try. But although I haven't found out the details of the other party, at least I know her residence. I've installed magic surveillance around her place. As long as she shows up, I can find out her identity in advance. Then after finding out the identity of the other party, should we arrest or kill them? Shaltir's thoughts were quite irritable, and she directly proposed to kill them. Our goal is the Rune of Snake. These guys can't run away. If we just solve them, there's no need to cause such trouble. Besides, this phoenix is just an addition. The most important thing is Hogg's situation. Anduin shook his head. He also pointed out, we don't know whether the Silver Spear's manpower is only on the surface. After all, these people were only locked from Thunderbird, but Thunderbird hasn't participated in the headquarters' affairs for several years. It's very possible they have hidden other Silver Spear members. Just as Anduin was speaking, there was a sudden fluctuation in the space in the room. Hogg had returned. My lord, the matter is serious, Hogg yelled as soon as he landed. End of this chapter. Chapter 462. Is he a golden snidget? After Hogg yelled that sentence, he panted nervously. Clearly, he was exhausted from the tracking trip. What happened? Tell me slowly. Could it be that you were discovered? Anduin looked at the furious Hogg and softly comforted him. I wasn't discovered, but I discovered something, and the problem is very serious, Hogg said smoothly. Is there anything special about that golden snidget? Shaltir couldn't help interjecting at this moment. That golden snidget, his real identity, is the Minister of Magic of Germany. Hogg finished speaking, stammering. That's impossible. Anduin's eyes widened in astonishment. How could the golden snidget be the Minister of Magic? You didn't mistake him, did you? At first, I wondered if it was a mistake, but after careful identification, I can confirm that the person wearing the golden snidget mask is the Minister of Magic, Pete, as you mentioned. Hogg affirmed solemnly. We've only been here for a day. How can you recognize that he is the Minister of Magic? We haven't even seen what the minister looks like. Shaltir was also taken aback by Hogg's words and immediately asked. I'm not deaf, and it's not like I can't hear the conversation between him and others. I clearly heard others calling him Mr. Prey, Minister, Hogg said angrily. Explain in detail how you tracked the golden snidget. Have you recorded any video data? Although Anduin found it hard to believe, seeing Hogg's confident state, he instinctively chose to believe him. It's like this. Hogg took out a handful of recorded photos from his pocket and showed them to Anduin, then explained in detail the process of his tracking. It turned out that when Hogg started tracking the golden snidget, he was similar to Anduin and Shaltir at the beginning. The target basically stayed in the Ministry of Magic. Hogg didn't try to venture into the Ministry of Magic to ensure safety, but he didn't need to go in because the golden snidget came out. After Hogg waited for a while, the golden snidget left the Ministry of Magic with other wizards. At this time, Hogg locked onto the golden snidget and took pictures of him. He also tried to eavesdrop on their conversations and discovered that the golden snidget he was following was actually the Minister of Magic, according to the other wizards. This discovery shocked Hogg greatly. The real identity of Minister Pete as a secret cadre of the Silver Lance was simply sensational. After listening to Hogg's general description, Anduin picked up the photo that recorded the golden snidget, or rather, Minister Pete. The photo showed a middle-aged man in his 60s with a well-proportioned figure and a strong spirit, accompanied by several wizards in professional attire. It doesn't make sense. Anduin couldn't help frowning as he looked at the figure in the photo. After Pete became the Minister of Magic, he tried his best to promote the division of the German magical world. It is not unacceptable to say that he is connected to the Silver Lance or has any connection with the club. But the reason why he can't accept it is that this Pete is the golden snidget himself. According to the information obtained from Thunderbird, the golden snidget is also a wizard who has drunk the elixir of life, so he should exhibit two characteristics. One is that his appearance should be in his 30s or 40s, because the elixir has the effect of rejuvenating youth. However, judging from the portraits in the photos, the person looks much older, around 60 or 70 years old. But if it is said that the person has not drunk the elixir, it does not seem likely, because the golden snidget is at least 90 or 100 years old, and the figure in the photo does not match that age. Of course, the golden snidget might have used a transformation potion, like the polyjuice potion, to disguise himself, but Minister Pete has been in office for 5 or 6 years. Can he really maintain such a transformation without being discovered for so long? Moreover, the polyjuice potion is not simple to make. A potion that can sustain a transformation for 5 or 6 years would require a vast amount of materials. This alone does not fully explain that the other party must not be a golden snidget in disguise. The biggest question is, how dare the golden snidget appear in public after taking the elixir? It is known that people who have taken the snake slough potion must experience the snake slough once a month. During this period, the person is completely vulnerable. Other snake slough wizards hide themselves in the dark to avoid detection. As the Minister of Magic, Pete has to stay in the public eye most of the time, So Anduin couldn't figure out how the other party had the courage to pretend to be the Minister of Magic. Wouldn't he be afraid that his secret would be discovered? What would he do if someone saw him shedding his snake skin? The molting ceremony lasts for several hours. If someone who knew his background figured out the snake's molting period, wouldn't that mean he could be easily manipulated or even killed? My lord, what do you think? Is this guy a golden snidget? Shaltair asked Anduin with some uncertainty. I don't know. If Minister Pete is really a golden snidget, then I can only say that the other party is incredibly brave to appear in the public eye, Anduin replied after some thought. There are several possibilities regarding the identity of the golden snidget. First, this Pete is not the golden snidget. He might have given Pete his mask to play the golden snidget for him. You mean, Hogg suddenly realized, this Pete is actually the substitute for the golden snidget? It's possible, Anduin nodded calmly. Of course, there is another possibility. Pete is indeed the golden snidget himself, but he has some way to avoid the snake's transformation or ensure his own safety. Then we only need to monitor him for a month. If he really has a molting period, won't that prove he is the golden snidget? Hogg exclaimed excitedly. Although this method is a bit crude, it's not impossible, Anduin admitted. But in that case, we need to find a reasonable way to stay in Germany. What can we do? Our excuse this time is a business trip, and the longest stay seems to be less than 2 months, Shaltair calculated on her fingers. We can open a branch here and use that as an excuse to stay, Anduin suggested with a chuckle. Open a branch? Will the German Ministry of Magic agree? Shaltair frowned. Shaltair's concern was valid. It is very difficult for foreign companies to open branches in another country because it can squeeze the local industry. For example, in the UK, apart from the Flue Powder Company, Gringotts, and a few publishing houses, there are hardly any foreign industries. This is not something that can be achieved with money alone. It doesn't matter whether they agree or not. The act and motivation of trying to open a branch can serve as a cover for us to stay in Germany, so it doesn't matter if we don't succeed later, Anduin explained indifferently. The situation in Germany was much more complicated than he had imagined, and it was likely that it wouldn't be resolved in the short term. Therefore, finding an excuse to stay was very important. So that's the case, Shaltair nodded, understanding. She then looked at the photo of Pete again. Then how should we deal with Minister Pete next? It's too passive to just wait and see. Indeed, Anduin nodded, though he seemed a bit conflicted. Before we uncover the full details about the other party, we shouldn't act rashly, especially since we can't take direct action. This is the Minister of Magic we're dealing with. I don't want to be accused by the German Ministry of Magic of assaulting their minister. It's really troublesome, Hogg muttered irritably, scratching his head with his hind legs. Even if this Pete isn't the Minister of Magic, he has a close relationship with the Silver Spear. I didn't expect this broken club to have penetrated so deeply into Germany and caused such a split. What good does it do them? In the eyes of outsiders, it may seem quite foolish to split a country from the Ministry of Magic, Anduin said with a sneer. From a political standpoint, the powers of the Minister of Magic would be divided. But for an illegal organization like the Silver Spear, if they successfully split a Ministry of Magic, they can place enough people in one of the branches and indirectly control a country. What do you mean? Shaltair asked seriously, looking at Hogg in shock. Are they trying to establish a country completely controlled by them? Don't dismiss the possibility, Hogg replied, still shocked but nodding calmly. If the Ministry of Magic is successfully split, the personnel in the 2 newly established ministries will be separated. Among the existing staff, Pete could very well become the Minister of Magic of one of the new countries. He only needs to ensure that the ministry he controls is loyal to him, which is equivalent to the birth of a country completely controlled by the Silver Spear. Shaltair finished, her face growing increasingly grim. She turned to Anduin. If this is the case, the Silver Spear in Germany might have more members than just those 4. Anduin nodded in agreement. The 4 Silver Spear members he had tracked were based on the Thunderbird's mask address book, which seemed like a small number. But if the Silver Spear is planning a split coup in Germany, they will need more manpower and are likely to develop more members and collaborators. However, Anduin wasn't too worried about Germany actually being divided. He remembered that the Berlin Wall would fall in 2 years, and East and West Germany would reunite in 3 years. Of course, this was assuming there wouldn't be a violent coup. End of this chapter. Chapter 463. Non-Governmental Organizations. Despite the unsettling discovery that the Minister of Magic might be the Golden Snidget, Anduin and his companions decided to rest and observe the situation the next day before taking any action. Early the next morning, a knock on Anduin's door interrupted their plans. He quickly instructed Hogg and Shaltir to hide in the magical suitcase. The visitor was Feng, the information broker Anduin had met the previous day. Feng stood at the door with a stack of parchment in his hand, smiling. "Mr. Wilson, I apologize for disturbing you so early, but I believe I have completed the commission you entrusted to me," Feng announced. "Really? I didn't expect such efficiency." "Please, come in," Anduin replied, stepping aside to let Feng enter. He had sought out a well-informed local to gather information about Minister Pete, and Feng had proven his capabilities. Feng handed over the documents, which contained detailed information about major German merchants, including their managers' backgrounds, preferences, and business scopes. Although Anduin's claim of opening a branch in Germany was merely a cover for a long-term stay, these materials were still necessary. Please don't underestimate the determination and energy of an intelligence broker, especially when it comes to local information. "This is second nature to me," Feng said with a dismissive wave. In truth, he had worked tirelessly through the night to gather the information, eager to prove his worth to Anduin. Anduin scanned the documents and paused at a particular name. "The owner of this Claremont Magic Supplies store is also running a black market behind the scenes?" he asked, surprised. "Yes, Mr. Milan Claremont is a potential partner. His store represents alchemy props from various countries, including British specialty brooms. However, his background is quite unique. He operates a small black market in West Germany," Feng explained. He had deduced that Anduin was looking for local partners and offered this information as a helpful hint. Feng continued, "Claremont seems to have connections with the Silver Spear. If you need more information, I can provide it." Anduin raised an eyebrow, impressed by Feng's perceptiveness. "You mentioned Claremont's special background. Does that mean he has significant black market connections?" he inquired. Feng hesitated, rubbing his fingers together. "The information about his firm is part of the commission. Details about the black market are a bonus. For more, you'll need to pay extra, right?" Anduin finished for him, unfazed. He appreciated the straightforwardness of someone who could be bought. He pulled out 50 galleons and placed them in front of Feng, then added an extra 10 galleons. "This is your final payment, plus 10 galleons for additional information. Is that sufficient?" Feng's eyes lit up at Anduin's generosity. As expected of an internationally renowned figure, "It's a pleasure doing business with you," he said, grinning broadly. Feng's smile stretched from ear to ear. He knew he had found a valuable ally and was determined to hold on to it. After a moment of contemplation, seemingly organizing his thoughts, he continued, "As I mentioned earlier, besides controlling a black market, Claremont also appears to have connections with the Silver Spear. I've seen him conversing with a mysterious figure wearing a faceless mask. Moreover, Claremont is the manager and financier of an organization called West German Endeavor, a radical civil group advocating for the separation of West Germany from East Germany. This organization is composed of radical wizards from West Germany who frequently make divisive remarks in newspapers and on the radio. They've had numerous conflicts with radical organizations in East Germany, leading to several altercations." Feng paused to emphasize his next point. "Do you remember Wiam from yesterday? He clashed with members of this organization. The West German Endeavor Society once came to this tavern to promote their separatist agenda. This clash led to a significant disturbance with the East Germans, eventually resulting in a physical confrontation." "Are there many such radical organizations in Germany?" Anduin inquired, aware that the Silver Spear had funded numerous local civic groups, with the Endeavor Society likely being one of them. Feng nodded. Indeed, there are quite a few. Besides the West German Endeavor Association, there are groups like the East German Progressive Trade Union, Munich Union, East Berlin Innovation Society, and Hamburg Courage Society. They all claim to fight for the interests of local wizards. Initially, these organizations united to help local wizards with their troubles. You know that Muggles in Germany once waged wars. Although wizards did not participate, the weapons used by Muggles were devastating. Many wizards' homes were destroyed, and these small organizations initially came together to help the affected wizards rebuild. Anduin nodded in understanding. Although wizards in Germany did not participate in World War II, the country was still bombed by the Allied forces, and some unfortunate civilian wizards were caught in the crossfire. These organizations seem to have existed for a long time, functioning like community neighborhood committees, primarily to support each other. During World War I, Grindelwald attempted to involve wizards in the conflict, resulting in significant suffering for many wizards. Despite their extraordinary powers, most wizards were civilians unfamiliar with combat, making them vulnerable to Muggle weapons. This experience likely influenced Grindelwald's desire to train a real wizard army. However, wizards have their own allegiances and camps, and despite their superior powers, they couldn't prevent wizards from different factions from opposing them. As a result, Muggle-born wizards in Germany and France, who had personally experienced World War I, rarely faced discrimination. They had witnessed the power of Muggle weapons and accepted the existence of Muggles. Consequently, they were less inclined to strictly adhere to the Secrecy Act, leading to a significant number of half-blood wizards in these countries. In Germany and France, Muggle-born and half-blood wizards wield considerable influence, and their willingness to accept Muggles has made them susceptible to the indirect influence of Muggle society, including the division of Muggle Germany. This, in turn, has affected the local wizarding community. On the contrary, places such as Britain and Northern Europe, which were not affected by the war, dislike the secrecy law and discriminate against Muggles. After a moment of contemplation, Anduin signaled Feng to continue speaking. At the same time, he took out 10 gold galleons and placed them in front of Feng. Seeing the gold, Feng's enthusiasm surged. Initially, the actions of these organizations were quite moderate. Over time, they evolved into non-governmental interest groups, such as the Munich Federation, which has since been renamed the Munich Explosion Card Club. However, after a prolonged period of division in the German Muggle country, conflicts began to arise between wizards in East Germany and West Germany. These non-governmental organizations started to support local wizards and speak on their behalf. Gradually, their support for local wizards turned into support for the division itself, fostering animosity and hostility towards wizards on the other side. Of course, they represent only a small number of wizards. In reality, although most Muggles and half-blood wizards are affected by the split, the sentiment for division is not widespread. Nonetheless, these groups continue to express support in name. As a result, under the influence of these organizations, a certain degree of division has indeed emerged in Germany. For instance, they are obstructing the passage of the Flu Network Division Bill. Moreover, the actions of these groups have recently escalated into violent conflicts. A notable incident occurred 2 years ago when the East Berlin Innovation Society and the West German Endeavor Society clashed at Dudenhaus. They openly used spells and black magic against each other. During that conflict, both sides gathered more than a dozen wizards, and 6 wizards were severely injured. Although no one was killed, the incident had a significant impact and indirectly led to the division of Dudenhaus. Since then, there have been numerous smaller conflicts, and now in Dudenhaus, East Germany and West Germany are clearly divided. Crossing the isolation gate is seen as a provocation, and tensions are high. Feng shrugged helplessly, clearly frustrated with the current situation in Germany. If the division became permanent, his business would undoubtedly suffer. That's the way it is, but doesn't the Ministry of Magic intervene in these violent conflicts? Anduin asked, now having a basic understanding of these so-called civil society groups. He shifted the conversation towards the Ministry of Magic's role in the matter. End of this chapter. Chapter 464, two goals. They want to handle it, but it's very troublesome to deal with. Feng shook his head helplessly. These folk groups are basically civilian wizards, and they are not considered criminal organizations. It's difficult to assign responsibility after a conflict. Besides, the Ministry of Magic can only do so much. After all, the law does not blame the public. Is there really a saying that the law does not punish the public when there are violent incidents? If you ask me, they should be locked up and educated, and their organizations should be banned. In Anduin's eyes, the behavior of these civil groups was not much different from a color revolution. It was best to be decisive when dealing with it. Otherwise, it would lead to catastrophe sooner or later. Your thoughts are very similar to Director Andre's. He also suggested direct intervention. Feng laughed, somewhat amused by Anduin's words. The young wizard in front of him looked polite, but his thoughts were mature and decisive. Director Andre? Anduin showed a little curiosity upon hearing the name. Ah, Director Andre is the head of the Department of Law Enforcement of the Ministry of Magic. He is opposed to secession and is very disgusted with these civil groups. He has repeatedly proposed in the Ministry of Magic to severely punish mobs and has led aurors to arrest troublemakers many times. But Minister Pete disagreed with him and repeatedly ordered the release of those arrested civilian groups across departments. When Feng mentioned Chief Andre, his expression became more animated, showing some admiration but also a trace of fear. He had suffered at the hands of this grumpy and jealous chief. After all, his work involved gray areas, so he had to deal with aurors frequently. Oh, according to what you said, there are quite big differences between them. With Director Andre's actions, won't Minister Pete be angry? Anduin was genuinely curious about Director Andre. The director of the Department of Legal Enforcement seemed to be at odds with Minister Pete. Feng shrugged helplessly. It's not just a disagreement. The two Ministry of Magic executives are about to clash. Minister Pete has been trying to promote the split between East and West Germany in the Ministry of Magic, while Director Andre has been opposing him. Really? Can you tell me more about these two? Anduin said, taking out another 10-galleon gold coin and placing it in front of Feng. No problem. In fact, many people in the Ministry of Magic know about it. Feng smiled when he saw the gold coin and immediately began to narrate with great interest. Anduin gained a basic understanding of the German Ministry of Magic from Feng's narration and also learned about Pete and Andre. Minister Pete had a rather special resume. He was not originally an employee of the Ministry of Magic. He was actually an expert in charms before. He was well known in German academic circles because of the development and optimization of many spells. His status in Germany was comparable to that of Newt in the United Kingdom. However, Pete was different from Newt in that he was very passionate about politics. Since he obtained the qualification of the Wizengamot Council very early, he often haunted the Ministry of Magic, participated in the approval of various bills, and communicated with senior officials of the Ministry of Magic and other Wizengamot members. The Wizengamot in the wizarding world was not the same as the Muggle Parliament that Anduin knew. The Wizengamot had a fixed number of 50 members, and any excess members could only be listed as candidate members. When some of the original members retired, or to fill in the seat after retiring, Anduin was a candidate, and it might take a few years for him to become a full member. The Wizengamot is a prestigious council that includes many well-known domestic wizards, most of whom were invited to join on their own initiative. Although the members of the Wizengamot possess considerable rights, many of these famous wizards do not have a strong political enthusiasm. They typically participate only in major events and are otherwise occupied with their own affairs. Consequently, their involvement does not significantly impact the daily operations of the Ministry of Magic. However, Pete is an exception. He has a keen interest in political work. Recognizing this, the former Minister of Magic invited Pete to officially join the Ministry of Magic about 10 years ago, assigning him to the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, a department with substantial power. This appointment indicates the former minister's trust in Pete and suggests that Pete is quite adept and well-liked. Pete excelled in his role. leveraging his excellent interpersonal skills and affinity to build strong relationships. His success led to his election as the new Minister of Magic 5 years ago. In contrast, Director Andre has a different background. He has worked in the German Ministry of Magic for decades, starting immediately after graduating from magic school. 30 years ago, he became the head of the Law Enforcement Division, a position he secured due to his formidable magical abilities and strict character. Andre's tenure has been marked by stability, but his bad temper and lack of popularity have hindered his career advancement. He is known for his uncompromising stance on crime, often using the unforgivable curses on dark wizards. Director Andre's personality is somewhat similar to Moody's, though Anduin believes Andre is not as extreme. Andre has frequently opposed Minister Pete's decisions, such as the split bill Pete submitted. This opposition has led to numerous conflicts between the two within the Ministry of Magic. Andre's low emotional intelligence and tendency to make inflammatory remarks in the Wizengamot have further alienated many members. In contrast, Minister Pete is more politically savvy. He has used both overt and covert exchanges of interests, along with his well-established connections, to garner support from many Wizengamot members. As a result, the split bill progressed smoothly. According to rumors, Minister Pete's influence within the Ministry of Magic is growing. The Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, where he initially worked, is firmly under his control. After the former director of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures resigned due to illness, Pete appointed a new director from his own ranks. Similarly, the director of the Department of Magical Transportation, appointed by Pete, has been actively promoting the division of the Ministry of Magic. Each office in this department has now split into two, reflecting the division between East and West Germany, a change Anduin has experienced firsthand. The Department of International Magical Cooperation remains neutral, led by a director who avoids conflict and keeps a low profile. Currently, the only department within the Ministry of Magic that strongly supports Andre is the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Quidditch is not a particularly popular sport in Germany, and the influence of the department overseeing it is minimal. After a brief investigation, Anduin understood the situation clearly. It seemed that the German Ministry of Magic had been thoroughly infiltrated by the Silver Spear organization. Regardless of whether Pete was the Golden Snidget, he was undoubtedly a member of the Silver Spear. The directors of the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, and the Department of Magical Transportation were likely members of the club as well. It was even possible that all three were Silver Spear operatives. Considering that Germany is the headquarters of the Silver Spear, it made sense. The magical creatures smuggled from Europe and the Americas were primarily transported there for pharmaceutical purposes. If the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures wasn't complicit, it would have been impossible for such activities to go unnoticed for so many years. After gaining some insight into the Ministry of Magic's inner workings, Anduin realized he might be able to leverage Director Andre. Since Minister Pete was a Silver Spear member, Anduin couldn't use overly aggressive tactics. He wasn't entirely confident that he could take Pete down without alerting others. If discovered, he would face charges of assaulting the Minister of Magic. Given the circumstances, a duel approach seemed best. On the surface, he could collaborate with Andre to undermine Pete's influence. Secretly, he could act as a Silver Spear member and look for opportunities to locate the Rune Snake within the organization. Anduin had two primary objectives in Germany. The optimal goal was to find and eliminate the Rune Snake. However, this was no easy task. The Rune Snake's extreme caution had allowed him to evade capture for decades, even from his adopted son, Thunderbird, and others. The secondary goal was to dismantle the Silver Spear faction led by the Golden Snidget and seize their resources. The Silver Spear headquarters and warehouse were valuable targets that Anduin couldn't ignore. As for Sir Merlin's request to identify the Silver Spear leader, Anduin could claim it was the Snidget. After all, the leader of this nefarious organization had become the German Minister of Magic, which was a convincing argument. Sir Merlin only knew that the silver spear was connected to the saints and that their leader was plotting something. Anduin doubted they were aware of the elixir. When the time came, he could use the fact that the silver spear aimed to dominate the German regime as a cover. The elders would likely be grateful for his efforts. Having made up his mind, Anduin quickly wrote 2 greeting cards and handed them to Feng, instructing him to deliver them to Director Andre and Minister Pete, respectively. End of this chapter. Chapter 465, Silver Spear Headquarters. The reason Anduin wanted to meet with the 2 senior officials of the Ministry of Magic was to test their true intentions. He couldn't rely solely on Feng's observations to determine their positions. Who knew if Andre was a barb-pad-flying wolf, pretending to oppose Pete while secretly collaborating with him? Andre might be helping the separatists in a deceptive manner, only to push the blame onto Pete. As for Minister Pete, Anduin was uncertain about his status. Based on Feng's information, Pete had been trying to infiltrate the Ministry of Magic for at least 10 years. This made it unlikely that Pete had been replaced halfway using Polyjuice Potion. Therefore, there were 3 possibilities. 1. Pete was controlled by the Imperious Curse. 2. Pete was a substitute for the Golden Snidget, essentially a short spear. 3. Pete was the Golden Snidget himself. Anduin hoped for the first or second scenario. If Pete was the Golden Snidget himself, it would be more troublesome. It would mean Pete had a method unknown to Anduin, allowing him to ignore drug side effects and move freely in the outside world. In that case, Anduin would have to expose Pete's identity or attack him while hiding his own. However, the former Silver Spear elders were highly skilled. A covert attack might not succeed without Anduin using his full strength, which could reveal his identity. His wild minds were distinctive, making it easy for someone to trace them back to him. According to Thunderbird, his 3 brothers were all very strong and possessed unique magical abilities. Thunderbird's signature skills included Blue Fiendfire and Steven's Insulating Magic Shield, representing ultimate destructive and protective power. The Black Dragon, who fought with Thunderbird in America, was a master of group battles, capable of summoning a dozen Iron Men on the battlefield. The Phoenix was known for black magic and necromantic studies, such as the ghost summoning bag used by Bird Snake in Ireland and the corruption curse in the club's database. Thunderbird knew little about the Golden Snidget. Although they grew up together, the Golden Snidget's work in the Saints Association was more logistical, and Thunderbird had rarely seen him in action. The Golden Snidget's methods were known to be strange. Anduin targeted the Golden Snidget from the beginning. If he had focused on the Phoenix and the Golden Snidget used some strange means to hide, it would have been regrettable. If only these guys' abilities matched their code names, Anduin thought, shaking his head. Gerald, codenamed Thunderbird, was a fire user, while the Phoenix studied necromancy. After sending out the invitation, Anduin released Hogg and Shaltir, instructing them to continue monitoring the Silver Spears. Hogg was to keep an eye on Minister Pete, suspected of being the Golden Snidget. The shape-shifting lizard, being a recluse, was no longer monitored him in real time, and instead asked Shaltir to guard the Phoenix. As for Anduin, he planned to inspect the shops selling his products to see how the business was doing. If possible, he could also visit the wizards on the list of several shops and learn about the local conditions from them while looking for dealers for follow-up agents. After all, this was his real business. It was unlikely that the 2 officials from the Ministry of Magic would make an appointment with him so soon. They would have to wait in line for a few days. After a busy day, Anduin and the others met in the tavern room. He had spent the whole day shopping around Dudenglu and discovered a very frustrating issue. When he was in Egypt, he signed distribution contracts with 2 German merchants, one specializing in civilian products such as magic lamps and gramophones, and the other representing high-level alchemy props such as amulets. Initially, he didn't notice any problems, but today, after field inspection, he found out that these 2 merchants belonged to different areas in Duden building on the side of West Germany. In the current Germany, after the official bill promoted by Minister Pete and the continuous efforts of non-governmental organizations, It was the norm that wizards on both sides of East and West Germany did not interfere with each other. There was even a bit of political correctness involved. So an East German, even if opposed to secession in his heart, would not risk going to West Germany to buy things. As a result, Anduin's products couldn't meet all the markets in Germany. East Germans couldn't buy magic pendants, and West Germans couldn't buy magic lamps. This situation was too frustrating. Anduin was speechless after discovering this. The separatists had not only messed up Germany, but also affected his business. In the eyes of Anduin, who had become a qualified profiteer, he now had another reason to deal with the Silver Spear. You can do whatever you want, as long as it doesn't hinder him from making money. As for Hogg and Shaltir, who went out to monitor, they didn't gain much today. Minister Pete was quite diligent in his work and stayed in the Ministry of Magic all day long. The other Phoenix was like a recluse, squatting in his residence all day. Anduin suspected that the Silver Spears must have been active in Germany, otherwise the two core members wouldn't have been deployed in one place. The next day, Hogg and Shaltir continued their surveillance activities. Anduin knew there was no rush. He needed enough information to avoid alerting the enemy. He had more important things to do today. In East Berlin, somewhere in the Treptow-Kupnik district, Anduin, dressed in a Silver Spear costume, appeared in an alley next to an old building with a disillusionment charm on his body. After confirming that there was no one around, Anduin drew out his aspen wand and tapped it a few times on a marble wall according to a special pattern. Then he apparated again and disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, he had traveled more than 10 kilometers and arrived in another uninhabited alley in the Marzahn-Hellersdorf district of East Berlin. As he entered the alley, he felt as if his whole body had been penetrated by a membrane made of magic power. Realizing this, Anduin dispelled the disillusionment charm on his body and stood in the alley, waiting quietly. He was now at the headquarters of the Silver Spear, and what he did before was the necessary code to enter the headquarters. To enter, one must first go to a place far away to cast an entry notice, then come here to wait. Someone would naturally come to guide him in after a while. If you went directly to the headquarters, not only would you not be able to enter, but you will also be regarded as an intruder, and the headquarters will become silent, with the entrance completely closed. At that point, you won't be able to find the entrance, even if you search every inch of this place. After Anduin learned about the entry procedures, he made his own judgment. The alley he was currently in was probably not the actual location of the headquarters. The door that would open next was likely a portal that could transport people to another place. Without making Anduin wait too long, a brick wall in the alley cracked open like the entrance to Diagon Alley, revealing a dark hole. However, Anduin did not enter immediately. According to Thunderbird, someone must guide you through the door after it opens. Entering without authorization would be dangerous. The portal could lead anywhere, perhaps even to outer space or the deep sea. Don't waste my time. I'm not in the mood to play games with you, Anduin said, activating the alchemy device embedded in his teeth to change his voice, imitating Thunderbird's tone. He knew that the fire ash snake stationed at the headquarters was a troublesome character. This individual often opened the headquarters door to lure unwarned members into entering rashly, only to send them to some inexplicable place. I was wondering who it was. Turns out it's Master Thunderbird. Why have you come back to the headquarters? Has the transfer station in the UK already been built? Surely you haven't come back to pick up more medicine. It's only been a few months since you last exchanged it, a figure said, stepping out from the dark hole. A man wearing a robe and a faceless mask appeared in front of Anduin, mocking him in a frivolous tone. This was the short spear fire ash snake. These silver guns held high status within the organization, and they all knew about the elixir. Anduin guessed that they had also taken it. Stop talking nonsense. Take me in first, or do you want me to chat with you here? Anduin replied, maintaining his bad-tempered tone. Okay, I'm just a lowly janitor. How dare I provoke someone like you? Just follow me, the ash snake said in a frivolous tone, then turned around and led the way through the hole. End of this chapter. Chapter 466, These will all be mine in the future. Don't always play tricks like this with me, Ash Snake. Anduin snapped as he saw the fire ash snake walking towards the entrance of the cave. He immediately stepped forward and grabbed the other's shoulder, ensuring he had control over the guide when entering the headquarters. Otherwise, who knew if the ash snake would maliciously change the landing point? This guy was notorious in Thunderbird's eyes. In the club, you couldn't underestimate anyone, nor could you trust others without reservation. This was the so-called Silver Spear. You really can't take a joke. Have you seen me trick you in all these years? The fire ash snake shrugged, looking bored as Thunderbird remained cautious. Humph, that's because I never gave you the chance, Anduin retorted coldly. Of course, if you really dared to do that, the headquarters might need a new janitor. Hearing the faint threat in Thunderbird's tone, Ash Snake curled his lips indifferently. Why do you always rely on threatening others to get things done? Can't you be gentle like others, such as me? Anduin sneered at the fire ash snake's audacity to call himself gentle. Because it's simple and efficient. So, are you going to lead the way, or do you really want to be touched by another man? He tightened his grip on the fire ash snake, pinching him slightly. The pressure made the fire ash snake's shoulder ache, and he cursed inwardly. This bastard was still so strong and rude. What annoyed him the most was dealing with this guy. The reason why the fire ash snake had so many temptations when entering the door wasn't because he doubted Thunderbird's identity. It was purely due to his own bad taste. In the Silver Spear Club, all the Silver Spears had taken the elixir. After experiencing a long and lonely life, they were more or less mentally abnormal. To put it bluntly, they were all neurotic. Some became more irritable like Thunderbird, while others became as neurotic as the fire ash snake. In comparison, the short spears who had only joined for a few years seemed much more normal. Reluctantly, the fire ash snake led Anduin through the magic door in front of them. After a moment of dizziness from the space transfer, they finally entered the headquarters. The headquarters of the Silver Spear did not look eerie like the imagined base of a mysterious organization. The first thing that caught the eye was a very gorgeous and majestic hall. The surrounding dark walls and stone pillars shone with a magical halo, illuminated by Bryant's torches. This magical flame, known as the Eternal Fire, was quite fitting for the Silver Spear. In front of and on both sides of the hall, there were 3 gates. Including the gate they had just entered, the entire hall looked like a square with a door on each side when viewed from above. The hall they were in was not just for decoration. Anduin knew this was actually the club's duel field. When assessments were needed, members would duel here. Of course, ordinary membership assessments were not required. Generally, senior members faced such internal assessments when they wanted to start a higher level of reward exchange or when they were promoted to spear. In the Silver Spear, there were 3 grades of rewards that could be exchanged. To exchange for rarer spells, potions, and materials, one needed to go through an assessment. Above these 3 grades was the elixir, which was also the standard for promoting to spear. So despite the empty space, the quality of the walls and ground was quite high, and ordinary spells couldn't break them. In addition to the entrance, there were 2 more doors. On the left and right sides of the hall are the club's database and material warehouse, respectively. When a member wants to exchange rewards, the fire ash snake will enter these warehouses to retrieve the items and then hand them over to the transformer lizard. Ordinary reward redemptions do not allow people to enter the headquarters. Facing the entrance is a living room. Members usually go there to exchange tasks and occasionally hold meetings. Despite the apparent tension among the members, they do gather for meetings. The first day of each month is known as the safe period for all members, a fixed date that everyone is aware of. The living room is also connected to the Mentos Circle, which can be used to create door keys, and it houses the residence of the Ash Snake. According to Thunderbird, the Fire Ash Snake is stationed at the headquarters year-round and has access to powerful spells in the database at any time, making it potentially very formidable, not weaker than most members. When Anduin first came into contact with the Silver Spear organization, he was cautious. He had to use all his tricks to win over the last Thunderbird. Now, with 3 silver spears in Germany, even a phoenix might not be weaker than a thunderbird, so confrontation was not an option. After a quick glance around the hall, Anduin walked straight to the door in front of him. He observed that the hall was too spacious to install monitoring equipment, so he would have to find a way in the living room. Fortunately, he had obtained part of the headquarters' design drawings from the Sphinx and knew some of the magical protections in place. As long as he was careful, his infiltrating monitoring equipment would not be discovered. The fire ash snake, who watched Thunderbird head straight into the living room, followed silently. The style of the reception room was completely different from the outside hall. While the hall was low-key, luxurious, and majestic, the reception room was warm and inviting. The floor was covered with thick, soft blankets, and Anduin could see that the ground was made of several complete pieces of chimera fur. The room was vast, spanning hundreds of square meters. The walls were adorned with warm wallpapers, and all the furniture was wrapped and decorated with various precious magical animal furs. Several complete magical animal heads hung on the walls, reminiscent of nobles who display their hunting trophies at home. Just looking at the decoration, you can see the bloody cruelty and wealth of the silver spear. Anduin muttered to himself as he felt the magical animal skin under his feet and looked at the head of a griffin hanging on the wall. These things will be mine in the future, he thought. Determined to protect magical animals from persecution, he resolved to eradicate the silver spear completely. He, Anduin, was at odds with crime and smugglers. Despite his inner shock, Anduin maintained a calm exterior. He walked straight to a sofa and sat down. The fire ash snake, noticing this, picked up a glass of wine from a nearby cabinet and offered it to Thunderbird. "Long time no see. How about a drink?" he asked. Anduin looked at the fire ash snake, who was also wearing a mask, through his own mask. "Are you wearing a mask and offering me a drink?" he thought, puzzled. Anduin raised his hand to caress his mask and replied teasingly, "All right, but drinking alone is too boring. If you want a drink, let's drink together." "Hey, don't! I was just kidding. Why are you taking it so seriously?" Fire Ash Snake exclaimed nervously as he saw that Anduin, also known as Thunderbird, was really going to take off his mask. If Thunderbird actually removed his mask, Fire Ash Snake wouldn't know how to handle it. Inwardly cursing this bastard who couldn't take a joke, Fire Ash Snake put down his wine glass resentfully and sat on the sofa not far from Thunderbird. "Come on, it's only been 4 months since you were here last. What's the rush?" Although he no longer made such crude jokes, Fire Ash Snake's tone remained flirtatious, masking the fact that beneath this facade was an old man nearing 100 years old. "2 things, Anduin said, raising 2 fingers in front of Fire Ash Snake. "First, I want to get an elixir in advance and a set of portkeys for travel between America and Europe." Fire Ash Snake shrugged. Thunderbird's request wasn't unusual. The elixir of immortality wasn't something handed out like candy, and there was no rule that it had to be collected at a specific time. As long as one had enough merit, they could receive a year's supply at once, and Thunderbird's merit was already exceptionally high. 1 more serving wouldn't be an issue. What puzzled Fire Ash Snake was Thunderbird's recent addiction to travel. He had already used a portkey to America more than a year ago and another to the UK just 4 months ago. Now he wanted another one? Was he going on a field trip? The cost of making a portkey that could travel directly to America wasn't cheap due to the distance involved. Secondly, the purpose of establishing a transfer station in the UK has completely failed. I am preparing to withdraw from the UK. I will return the right to use Unicorn to the headquarters and will be heading back to the United States soon, Anduin said, delivering the shocking news in a calm tone. Fire Ash Snake, who had been lounging on the sofa, was instantly shocked. He sat up straight and stared at Anduin through his mask, wide-eyed. End of this chapter. But also tinged with frustration. He knew the gravity of the situation and the potential fallout from such a significant setback. Anduin sighed, his expression remaining calm but resolute. "Yes, we've tried everything. The British Ministry of Magic is more vigilant than we anticipated, and the local magical community is not as fragmented as we hoped. Our operatives have faced constant surveillance and resistance, Any further attempts would only expose us more and risk the entire operation. Ash Snake clenched his fists, his mind racing through the implications. So, what now? Do we just abandon the UK and look elsewhere? We can't afford to lose this opportunity. We need to regroup and rethink our strategy, Anduin suggested. Perhaps we can find a different approach or a new ally within the UK. But for now, we must pull back and avoid drawing any more attention to ourselves. Ash Snake nodded reluctantly, understanding the necessity of caution. All right, we'll pull back for now, but we can't let this go. The UK is too important for our plans. Anduin agreed. We'll keep monitoring the situation and look for any openings. In the meantime, we should focus on strengthening our other routes and resources. The Americas are still a viable option, and we need to ensure that our operations there remain secure and productive. The two men fell silent, each lost in their thoughts about the challenges ahead. The stakes were high, and the path forward was fraught with uncertainty, but they knew they had to persevere, for the future of their organization depended on it. As they parted ways, Ash Snake couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The road to success was never easy, and the obstacles they faced were formidable. But he was determined to overcome them, no matter the cost. The Changfeng Conference would continue, and their quest for power and resources would not be derailed by this setback. Ray's voice, played by Anduin, was sharp and terrifying. Even Ash Snake could detect a hint of annoyance in his tone. I know better than you how much the club has invested in establishing the British transfer station. Now, there are 5 silver spears trapped there. Do you think I'm the kind of person who gives up easily? But how could it be that things went smoothly at first, but the news you sent back later only said that it would take some extra time? Ash Snake suddenly realized something. Could it be that Dumbledore made a move? The Fire Ash Snake could make such an association because he couldn't imagine why the Thunderbirds would fail. The strength of the club's veterans was no joke, and in the UK, the headquarters had arranged internal responses very thoughtfully. With strong capabilities and well-informed sources, there was no reason for a small UK to force the mighty Thunderbird to admit defeat. The only possible problem was force majeure. In Britain, coupled with force majeure, the first thing Fire Ash Snake thought of was Dumbledore. He was the man who had defeated Grindelwald head-on, and he was the only wizard in his mind who could match the Thunderbird in strength. The situation in the British wizarding world is more complicated than you might imagine. The newly appointed Minister Budnor implemented an iron-fisted policy. Our transportation route was thwarted not long after it was established. You are not unaware, Ray complained to Ash Snake, annoyed and somewhat depressed. However, could those aurors from the Ministry of Magic alone stop you? Is there something wrong with this? The Sphinx's stealth team is not weak, but after being dispatched to England, they didn't even make a splash. And there's also the Bird and Snake. That guy is very popular with Phoenix. The Fire Ash Snake counted the silver spears sent to England for support, then looked at the Thunderbird in disbelief. What happened in England? There must be something wrong here. Something is wrong indeed, thought Anduin secretly. Then he shouted at the Fire Ash Snake in an irritated tone. Are you questioning me? I will personally explain to the Runiv Snake what happened in England, and the rest is not up to you. The Fire Ash Snake, who had been reprimanded, realized he might have gone too far. These spears were all like crazy, and the details related to their respective tasks were as private as they were, and they were not willing to share them with others. But Fire Ash Snake was still a little unwilling. He had also taken the elixir, and the shortage of magical animals would affect him too. The failure of the British strategy will affect the future development of the club. You are aware of this. The project you are in charge of now has such a big mistake. The leader may not be willing to see you, and it is impossible not to explain the matter clearly. Then this is not your business. I suggest launching a long front conference. At that time, the major spearheads participating in the meeting will determine the next course of action. Regarding the specific situation in the UK, I will also report to everyone in a unified manner. However, what I can confirm now is that the UK no longer has the soil for incubating divisions, at least not in the past few years. The club is now on guard over there, and if they really want to go deeper, it will only cause greater losses, Thunderbird said to Fire Ash Snake with a serious look. The so-called Long Front meeting was a management meeting held entirely by Spears and Silver Spears during the security period at the beginning of the month. At that time, all Spears that could attend would gather at the headquarters. Generally, this kind of meeting was only held when major actions were reported and made. After all, just going to and from the meeting would cost a large number of resources. Keys, not to mention the time it takes. Seeing Thunderbird's confidence, Fire Ash Snake couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Even if 7 Silver Spears were gathered, Britain could not be dealt with, and 5 Silver Spears were lost. What is so terrifying about that ruined island country? Even the Thunderbirds who conquered the Americas dared not go one step further. As for convening the long-term meeting, it is not a big problem. It can indeed be initiated with Thunderbird's authority, and the British transfer station is also worthy of everyone's attention. Okay, I will notify Jin Fei Xia about this as soon as possible. He will make unified arrangements and notifications, but there is not much time left until the beginning of the month. I don't know how many people will be able to come by then, Fire Ash Snake said with a sigh. But now that the British Channel has been cut off, the supply of magical animals has been stretched thin. The rune snake is also to blame. In recent years, in order to expand its power, it plans to promote several spears. The supply from the club's breeding grounds alone won't last long, so we have to find a way to open up a new transportation route as soon as possible. Within the Silver Spear, everyone's dislike for the rune snake was blatant. It was not surprising that they liked to criticize the leader whenever they had the chance. But Anduin's heart suddenly stirred after hearing Fire Ash Snake's words. How many spears have been promoted? Breeding grounds? It seems that the consumption of magical animals by the Silver Spear is much higher than before, and now it may not be able to achieve a balanced output. That being the case, he might be able to exploit this weakness, thereby disrupting their position and muddying the waters within the club. However, even though Anduin was plotting in his mind, he didn't stop talking. Do you think I'm not in a hurry, and I don't feel sorry for losing so many goods in England? Thunderbird snorted coldly, then asked nonchalantly, You said the leader is planning to promote several spears soon? Are they developing a new branch again? Or did someone die? I remember that the last one promoted to spear was the Wicked Bird a few years ago. At that time, I watched her train a British spy for the headquarters, and the Nordic spear was killed by those guys from the Pure Land Society. It wasn't her turn, Thunderbird recalled. Hey, don't mention it, Fire Ash Snake said helplessly. Indeed, someone died. It was the Sack Leopard who was in charge of Bulgaria and Romania. The guards were beaten to death, and even the corpses were burned by dragon flames. End of this chapter. Chapter 468, Level 3 Authority Examination. Nixo? Ren also met a grim fate, Thunderbird teased with a smile. Indeed, as you say, Huohui Snake replied, resuming his nonchalant demeanor. I wonder how long this poisonous leopard will last. By the way, he's scheduled for the 3rd level authority examination in 2 days. He's also one of the candidates for promotion to the Spear. He's already confirmed for promotion to the Spear before even reaching 3rd level authority? And you mentioned that the Sack Leopard died 2 years ago, meaning it's been less than 2 years since he joined? Is the club that short on people now? Or is it a new branch that was established? I haven't heard anything about it. Anduin, disguised as Thunderbird, questioned. It's not a new branch. The other party has a special status and won't be an expatriate in the future. Huohui Snake hesitated before continuing. The other party is the Silver Spear developed by Golden Snidget. I've already disclosed too much. Oh? That's interesting. Jin Fei Xia, who is in charge of internal affairs, has actually started to develop manpower, Anduin mused, calculating silently. Given the special status and the fact that Snidget developed him, this Sack Leopard is likely a member of the German Ministry of Magic. Based on the information he had gathered, the other party could be the director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, or the Department of Magical Transportation. Could this person even be Minister Pete, an agent specially developed by Jin Snidget? No, if this sack leopard were Pete, why would he wear the golden Snidget mask? Jin Facia has no reason or need to do this. And considering Huohui Snake mentioned several spears would be promoted within the club, is it possible that the directors of the Ministry of Magic have already been absorbed into the silver spears? Using the elixir of immortality as bait could indeed tempt those high officials. Moreover, Jin Facia probably didn't even explain the price of the elixir to them. Once those guys drank the potion in front of him, wouldn't Jin Facia, who had mastered their molting stages, be able to manipulate them at will? The more Anduin thought about it, the more likely it seemed. The newly promoted spears are probably pawns laid by the club to split Germany, just like how the headquarters used her sister as a threat to control Azalea back then. Even within the club, the status of these silver spears is divided into different levels. Naturally, the one with the highest status and absolute power is the Rune Snake, followed by Thunderbird and the other four elders, then Huohui Snake and the short spears of saintly origin, such as the Sphinx. As for the rest, whether they are spears or short spears, their existence is somewhat like that of tools. The club would certainly not have any moral qualms about using them, doing whatever it takes. Is the temptation to establish a country completely controlled by the silver spear so great that Niven Snake and Golden Snidget would even use the elixir as bait? And by deceiving those spears in this manner, can they guarantee that this behavior won't backfire? Anduin sneered inwardly. The harvest of this trip to the headquarters was indeed significant. Just as Anduin was lost in his thoughts, Huohui Snake suddenly stopped, as if he had received some information, and then chuckled, "Speak of the devil, that poisonous leopard." As he arrived at the gate of the headquarters, Thunderbird couldn't help but speculate. Why did he suddenly appear at this time? Could it be that he is going to undergo a level authority assessment? He recalled what the Fire Ash Snake had mentioned before. Heh, maybe you're right. Jin Facia has already completed the loyalty assessment. I guess this is for the actual combat assessment. Speaking of which, he has exchanged a lot of magic spells from the headquarters before. I wonder how he has improved his strength, Ash Snake mused, standing up, and glancing at the wine cabinet next to him. I'm sorry, I need your help to look after the house. Don't steal a drink while I'm not around. Perhaps you should use the magic circle at the entrance to teleport him away and throw him into some uninhabited desert. Maybe it can satisfy your wish for many years, Thunderbird suggested maliciously. Haha, in a sense, you are much worse than me, and your heart is more vicious than mine, Fire Ash Snake chuckled, seemingly amused by Thunderbird's words. He even trembled with excitement for a moment. Perhaps after listening to Thunderbird's suggestion, he really had such thoughts, but he quickly hid them in his heart. This poisonous leopard would be of great use to the club's next plan. If he played badly, Jin Facia would not let him off easily. After watching the Fire Ash Snake walk out of the door, Anduin immediately closed his eyes, mobilizing and stretching his magic power and spiritual sense, as if he was sensing something. There is no feeling of being watched, and no monitoring magic has been detected. It seems that this place is safe, he concluded after a moment of concentration, feeling at ease. Then, a few metal spiders rustled down from Anduin's trouser legs, scattering immediately after landing and hiding in several corners of the living room. Anduin got up and checked them one by one, ensuring that they couldn't be detected either with the naked eye or through mental induction before he was satisfied. These monitoring spiders were high-grade items specially prepared by Anduin for the Silver Spear. When making them, he added high-grade materials such as refined mithril to each of them to ensure secrecy. He took this opportunity to carefully check the protective magic circle in the living room, quickly and accurately making some changes. He connected the magic pattern of the monitoring spiders with the magic circle in the room. In this way, no matter how powerful a wizard's perception of magic was, they would not be able to detect it. The monitoring spiders had become a part of the protective magic circle, and even if someone sensed it, they would only sense the existence of the magic circle without any sense of violation. Of course, Anduin didn't dare to modify too much. If a wizard who knew the protective magic circle was careful enough, they could easily detect the difference between the current magic circle and the original one. Then, Anduin hid a transmitter in the room. This small prop could penetrate the protection here, allowing what the monitoring spiders saw and heard to be transmitted. Because the entire Silver Spear headquarters was actually buried deep underground, the portal to the outside world was just a space portal connected to this side. A layer of rune circles was arranged on the magic circle of the headquarters to prevent detection and isolate magic power transmission. Fortunately, before coming here, Anduin had already obtained the blueprint from Sphinx. Although it was not a complete version, it allowed him to make targeted preparations in advance. As for the several doors connected to the reception room, Anduin only inspected them briefly and did not open them at will. He knew that these doors were equipped with induction magic, and if someone entered or exited at will, the ash snake would be able to detect it. After completing his task, Anduin walked out of the main entrance as if nothing had happened. He intended to take this opportunity to meet the special panther and observe the Silver Spear's assessment. Not long after, the fire ash snake and a masked man, dressed similarly, emerged from the gate's black hole one after the other. Unlike the Thunderbird, this new Silver Spear didn't seem to handle the fire ash snake with as much care. However, the fire ash snake didn't have such a bad attitude, secretly rubbing the poisonous leopard the wrong way. Of course, given the chance, the ash snake would love to try it on the Thunderbird. Upon entering the hall, the fire ash snake was momentarily stunned to see the Thunderbird and ding before him. He then laughed sinisterly. "Hey, I think you are quite boring." "What? Am I not allowed to come out and watch the show? It's been years since I left the headquarters, and I almost forgot about the actual combat assessments here. I wonder if your standards for duels have lowered," Anduin said, raising his head slightly in disdain and looking proudly at the Silver Spear beside the fire ash snake. The poison leopard looked at the Thunderbird in front of him, dazed. He hadn't expected anyone else to be at the headquarters. Who was this guy dragging him along? He glanced at the fire ash snake beside him with some doubt. "Ah, this guy looks like he deserves a beating, doesn't he?" Fire ash snake seemed to read the poison leopard's thoughts. "You don't need to worry about him, and even if you do, he won't change." Turning his head back to the Thunderbird, Fire Ash Snake continued, "Don't always act like that towards the newcomers. It makes people think our members aren't good at thinking." "As if you had a good brain," Thunderbird sneered coldly. "I'm not a saint. I don't have to be amiable when facing trash, and I'm not a waste collector." "Who are you calling trash?" Poison Leopard had never been so humiliated. He was furious at Thunderbird's words. Although he wore a mask, his anger was palpable as he glared at the Thunderbird. "Here we go again," Fire Ash Snake thought, glancing at Thunderbird speechlessly. This foul-mouthed guy never failed to piss people off. Little did they know, after Thunderbird left the headquarters for the Americas, the Silver Spear guns across Europe were as happy as during the Chinese New Year. Everyone had suffered long enough. Facing this bastard, they couldn't beat him, and he could kill them within 3 minutes of chatting. No wonder even Golden Snidget said that, since Thunderbird's absence in Europe, the atmosphere in the clubs had improved. After silently cursing Thunderbird a few times, Fire Ash Snake seemed to think of something amusing. His eyes narrowed teasingly, and he suddenly had a mischievous idea. "Hey, Thunderbird, why don't you host this assessment?" he suggested. End of this chapter. Chapter 469. Competing with Thunderbird? Thunderbird raised an eyebrow, pointing at himself in disbelief. He glanced at the poison leopard standing next to him before focusing his gaze on the Fire Ash Snake. "Me? Are you sure?" he asked. "That's right," Fire Ash Snake replied with a smirk. "I think you also want to relive the thrill of the actual combat assessment. I still remember how eager you were to host those evaluations. Don't you enjoy demonstrating your magic to the new members? This duel hall hasn't seen you in action for a long time. If I recall correctly, you used to be the combat instructor here." As if reminiscing, Fire Ash Snake twirled his wrists and made circles around his head before spreading his hands wide, presenting the duel hall to Thunderbird as if it were welcoming him back. Leaning closer to Poison Leopard's ear, Fire Ash Snake whispered, "I know you don't like this guy, and neither do we. I've arranged for someone to teach him a lesson. Don't worry, this so-called old man is all talk and no skill. Take this chance to show him what you're made of." Poison Leopard, a rookie who had only been with the club for 2 years, hadn't yet experienced Fire Ash Snake's deceitful nature. He instinctively believed him and glared fiercely at Thunderbird. "That's exactly what I intend to do," Poison Leopard said, emphasizing the words "old man" with a sneer. "But I wonder if this senior will dare to oversee my assessment." He shot Thunderbird a provocative look, thinking to himself, "This is my chance to embarrass this arrogant fool. I'm not like the other newcomers. Before joining the club, I was already an experienced auror. With all the advanced spells I've learned, this should be a piece of cake." Thunderbird, recognizing Fire Ash Snake's manipulative tactics, glanced at the eager Poison Leopard and smirked coldly. "Heh, although I don't like wasting time on trash, it might be fun to relive the old days." "Fine, I'll oversee this assessment," Thunderbird said reluctantly. "Hey, I knew you wouldn't let everyone down," Fire Ash Snake teased. "But be careful. Don't underestimate Poison Leopard just because he has second-level authority. He's stronger than he looks." Fire Ash Snake stepped aside, clearly enjoying the unfolding drama. He had been bored at headquarters for too long and wasn't about to miss this show. If they weren't all wearing masks, he might have even grabbed some popcorn and invited the other Silver Spears to watch. Poison Leopard took his position at the main entrance of the duel hall, quickly turning sideways into a dueling stance. He raised his chin at Thunderbird provocatively. "Heh, this fool doesn't know what he's in for," Fire Ash Snake thought, mocking Poison Leopard internally. He had long been dissatisfied with the newcomers introduced by Golden Snidget. These guys, with their noble status, had been designated as spears early on and never paid much attention to the other Silver Spears. Just wait, you'll see something even crazier today. As the tension in the duel hall mounted, the stage was set for an unforgettable showdown. The Thunderbird paid no attention to the provocation of the Nangdu Leopard. Instead, it slowly walked to the opposite side of the Nangdu Leopard and shook its head disapprovingly. Have young people these days forgotten what dueling etiquette is? Striking that ridiculous pose just makes you look foolish. After speaking, the Thunderbird drew out its aspen wand and swung it from top to bottom. "Show some respect and bow before the duel, idiot." At that moment, the Nangdu Leopard, who was on high alert, felt an immense weight on his back as soon as the Thunderbird waved its wand. The pressure made his hair stand on end and cold sweat break out all over his body. Under this heavy burden, he was forced to bend down and bow awkwardly. Only then did the pressure gradually subside. Having forced his opponent to bow, the Thunderbird placed his left hand behind his back in a gentlemanly manner, raised his right hand holding the wand slightly, and then bent down in a standard dueling salute. The Nangdu Leopard was taken aback by the Thunderbird's move, and the power that had just erupted from his opponent left him momentarily stunned. With a horrified expression, he glanced at the Fire Ash Snake standing nearby. "Is this what you call an old man?" The Fire Ash Snake shrugged helplessly, secretly laughing to himself. "This guy is an old man. I didn't lie, no. Distracted in a duel? Concentration, unqualified." The Thunderbird shouted angrily upon noticing the Nangdu Leopard's small movements. "Even if you are just a waste, you must at least have the awareness of being a waste. Don't waste my time, focus." "Damn, you bastard." The Nangdu Leopard, who had taunted him fiercely, had already forgotten the shock the Thunderbird had given him moments ago. Now, a ball of anger ignited in his mind. A little-known old man dares to point fingers in front of the director? Screw you. Shattered bones, rotting bones and heart, cold blade unsheathed, tremors of fear. The furious Nangdu Leopard used all his strength as he made his move. The wand in his hand connected, and he instantly cast 4 spells simultaneously, using the technique of multiple casting curse. He charged towards the Thunderbird at an extremely fast speed. Among these 4 spells, aside from Shattered Bones, the other 3, Rotting Bones and Heart, Cold Blade Unsheathed, and Tremors of Fear, were powerful spells he had learned from the club. Rotting Bones and Heart is a corrosion spell with strong penetrating power and adhesion. When parried by an ordinary iron armor spell, it can easily contaminate the magic armor, gradually corroding it. The fact that he could easily cast this spell using the technique of multiple spells demonstrated the extraordinary strength of the Nangdu leopard. Azalea struggled to use the corrosion spell, but the Nangdu leopard managed it with ease. The Cold Blade Unsheathed spell is a form of elemental magic that can condense a blade of ice in the air to stab the opponent, attacking with both magical and physical power. Upon hitting the target, it emits a burst of extremely strong cold air to freeze the enemy. Its effect is similar to the enhanced freezing spell developed by Anduin, but it is sharper, faster, and more concentrated in its attack. As for Tremors of Fear, this spell was developed by Phoenix and contributed to the club, much like Rotting Bones and Heart. Its effect is similar to Anduin's Fear Curse, but while Anduin's Fear Curse induces group fear, Tremors of Fear targets a single individual. Consequently, the effect is more pronounced than the Fear Curse. Those hit by this spell will lose the ability to resist, and individuals with weak wills may even be paralyzed with fear. Thunderbird faced the onslaught of spells with a calm demeanor, even taking the time to critique them. It's just an ordinary forecast spell. The casting time is slow, the rate of fire is barely acceptable, and the spellcasting technique is decent. As for the spell's strength, Thunderbird paused briefly. While speaking, he completed his own spellcasting. His movements were swift, his hand a blur as he tapped the air 4 times. The Poison Leopard soon realized that Thunderbird was mirroring his spells. The spells Body and Bone, Rotting Bone and Heart, Cold Blade Unsheathed, and Tremor of Fear were cast in quick succession, each one intercepting its counterpart in midair. The collision of these spells created a violent surge of magic, causing a strong wind to blow through the previously enclosed duel hall, ruffling the clothes of the 3 Silver Spear members present. Despite the fierce clash, Thunderbird's spells proved superior. They overpowered the Poison Leopard's magic, pushing through with a slower but unstoppable force. Panic set in for the Poison Leopard. He hadn't anticipated that his full-strength spells would crumble so easily against Thunderbird's. Trash like this can't be expected to perform well. With this level of spell strength, to give it a score of 4 at most, Thunderbird remarked disdainfully, his tone flat as if addressing a child rather than a fellow wizard. Oh, is it a 10-point system? Fire Ash Snake, who was watching with amusement, interjected. Of course, it's on a 100-point scale, Thunderbird replied casually, glancing at Fire Ash Snake. Fire Ash Snake chuckled inwardly. Watching Thunderbird's arrogance in action was entertaining, as long as he wasn't the target. The Poison Leopard, however, had no time for their banter. He forced himself to stay calm and quickly responded to the approaching spells. Oolong out of the hole, he shouted, summoning a black python to intercept the corruption curse. The python was instantly corroded, but it managed to halt the curse's advance. End of this chapter. Chapter 470, Spinning Ice Storm, Fractured. After using the Oolong out of the cave curse to counteract the corrosion curse, the Poison Leopard didn't waste any time. He quickly cast a split spell, targeting Cold Blade Unsheath and Fear Tremor. The spells collided mid-air, neutralizing each other. With a swift motion, he swung his wand aside and cast an Iron Armor spell to block the final attack of Broken Bones. Nangdu Bao, who was struggling to resist the onslaught, was extremely annoyed. He didn't expect Thunderbird to counter his attacks so effortlessly, using the same spell-casting skills and spells to demonstrate his strength. He had also overheard the conversation between Thunderbird and Fire Ash Snake earlier. This club was full of arrogant individuals, and the face of the Poison Leopard, hidden under his mask, twisted with rage. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being ruthless, he thought. What was supposed to be a routine authority assessment had turned into a personal affront. The Poison Leopard's wand shook again, and his magic power gathered and vibrated at a high speed, preparing for a powerful spell. Thunderbird, standing directly opposite him, didn't interrupt. He watched calmly, as if he didn't care about the Poison Leopard's actions. Humph, just as I thought, Nangdu Bao sneered inwardly. He knew the arrogant Thunderbird wouldn't interrupt his spellcasting. Let me show you what real power is, you fool. Spinning ice storm. With a loud shout, the poison leopard swung his wand violently. A blast of freezing air erupted from his position, instantly covering the ground with frost. A violent whirlwind formed around him, and large ice crystals materialized out of thin air, spinning rapidly with him at the center. The crystals reflected the dazzling light emitted by the Goulet Immortal fire. These ice crystals were not mere decorations. Each one was as sharp as the ice knives in the Cold Blade Unsheathed spell and carried strong freezing energy. Even a glancing blow from these crystals would cause severe frostbite. Oh, isn't this Manticore's special skill, the spinning ice storm? I didn't expect you to teach him this spell. This isn't a magic that can be exchanged for a mere level 2 authority, right? Thunderbird recognized the spell and looked at the fire ash snake with a curious expression. Are you being too partial to these newcomers, violating the club's regulations by allowing them to redeem a spell meant for 3rd-level authority members? Anduin knew the significance of this magic. The Spinning Ice Storm spell was one of the few powerful spells available in the club's database. Its inventor, Manticore, had a very special identity. Manticore was a former brother of the 4 elders, including Thunderbird and Golden Snidget, and one of the original 7 founders of the club. Manticore had died in battle during the late stages of the Saint Party, and his unique spells were included in the database as a tribute. He was a talented Silver Spear among the original 7, recognized for his strength alongside Thunderbird and Phoenix. As the foremost authority in knowledge, he also invented the most spells. At that time, the Manticore possessed strength second only to the Thunderbird and had a spell development ability second only to the Phoenix. Unlike the Thunderbird, whose only self-created spell was Gerald's insulating spell. With his signature blue fiendfire actually learned from Grindelwald, the Manticore was different. He was deeply passionate about academic research and had a particular affinity for elemental magic. Spells like Cold Blade Unsheathed and Spinning Ice Storm in the club were all his creations. If their former brother had survived, his current achievements and strength might have surpassed the rest of them. Manticore had a very close relationship with his brothers at that time. This is why the code name Manticore has not been reassigned to anyone else, and the 4 survivors rarely use the spells he invented. They avoid them mainly because they fear that using those spells would bring back painful memories. According to Thunderbird, the reason the survivors willingly became puppets of the elixir was due to a deep-seated fear of death. They lamented the fragility of life, seeing even a genius like Manticore wither away so easily. Anduin had a good impression of the spell, Spinning Ice Storm, so he recognized it immediately upon seeing it. The fire ash snake, observing from the side, turned dark when he saw the nymphomaniac cast, Spinning Ice Storm. This meant that Jinfacia had taught this spell to the poison leopard privately, breaking the club's rules. Fire Ash Snake cursed inwardly at this dishonesty. He then looked at Thunderbird with concern. He wasn't worried about what the poison leopard could do to Thunderbird with this spell, but he knew what this magic represented. It was a connection to an old friend, and he feared Thunderbird might become enraged. Nervously, Fire Ash Snake swallowed and quickly drew his wand. You daring fool, let me show you what real power is. Let's see how you handle this curse. At this moment, the whirling ice storm had fully formed, and the poison leopard roared at Thunderbird. Thunderbird, standing directly opposite, seemed like a stunned doll, staring at the storm in a daze, as if recalling something from the past. Seeing this, Nangdubao sneered coldly. Was Thunderbird completely scared to death? If so, he should kneel and beg for mercy. Malice raged wildly in Nangdubao's heart, like the ice crystals flying around him. He viciously pointed his wand forward, and the violent cold wind mixed with sharp ice crystals swirled and swept towards Thunderbird. Being able to use this spell proves that your strength is not bad, and your mind is quite sharp. Thunderbird, who had been stunned, suddenly muttered. He then raised his head and looked coldly at Nangdubao. But you are very foolish because you dare to use this magic in front of me. Fiend Fire Flying Flower. Thunderbird shouted loudly, his voice like thunder. A frightening wave of magic power erupted from him instantly. His entire body lit up with a dazzling red light, and fiery flames, so scarlet they seemed viscous, appeared out of thin air, blooming faster and faster. They gathered into a large sea of fiendfire flowers. This sea of flowers rushed forward like a stormy sea, instantly submerging the menacing ice crystal storm. The fiendfire flowers began to merge, gradually forming a massive wave of fiendfire that violently surged towards the poison leopard. Seeing this horrifying display, the poison leopard's confidence wavered. In the midst of the chaotic scene, the poison leopard was so terrified that it nearly lost control. Was the Thunderbird insane? Did it intend to kill itself along with him? But there was no time for such thoughts. The poison leopard could only channel all its magical power, using the icy winds and cold air of the whirling ice storm to fend off the raging fiendfire in front of it. It tried desperately to push the flames away, but the fiendfire cast by the Thunderbird was as dense and heavy as mercury, making it nearly impossible to resist. The poison leopard estimated it could hold out for less than a minute. In a desperate bid to withstand the violent flames, the poison leopard had exhausted all its strength. Surrendering or begging for mercy was no longer an option. "I don't want to waste time with trash anymore. Yanren!" Thunderbird's voice was cold and devoid of emotion. Without giving the poison leopard a moment to react or uttering any unnecessary words, Thunderbird called out the name of his weapon and pulled his wand with a swift motion. It was as if he had drawn a blade from the void itself, a scarlet fire knife that splashed with raging flames. Thunderbird raised Yanren high with one hand, his eyes filled with disdain. With a casual flick, as if swatting a fly, he brought the fiery blade down. The poison leopard watched in horror as the massive wave of fiendfire in front of him was cleaved in two. In his field of vision, the fiery blade continued to grow, slashing straight towards him. Paralyzed by fear, the poison leopard could only watch as the scarlet blade loomed closer. His heart was gripped by terror, and his body stood frozen. His mind went blank, as if he had already stepped into the realm of the dead. Boom! A deafening noise echoed through the duel hall, followed by a violent eruption of magical power at the poison leopard's position. A wave of magic spread out, gradually extinguishing the raging flames in the hall. The ground and walls still smoldered, green smoke rising as evidence of the intense heat that had once filled the space. After a few seconds, the poison leopard, initially stunned, realized he was still alive. In front of him stood a figure, green smoke rising from its clothes. It was the fire ash snake. End of this chapter. Chapter 471, I Believe You Are a Ghost. "Let's stop here, Thunderbird," said the fire ash snake, lowering its body. The tip of its wand, still glowing faintly, was pointed forward. It looked solemnly at the figure holding a long knife in front of it. "This is just a permission test. If you really kill this guy, we will all be in trouble." The fire ash snake knew it was in for a rough time when it saw Thunderbird cast fiendfire. Damn, it's just a normal test. Was it necessary to use the fiery knife? Sure enough, after pissing off this guy, he really could do anything. And after Thunderbird pulled out his signature move, Fire Ash Snake knew he couldn't just stand by and watch. Fortunately, he had prepared beforehand. Just as Thunderbird was about to swing his knife, Fire Ash Snake hurriedly used his secret technique to rush to the poison leopard. He arrived just in time, and Thunderbird didn't use all his strength. Otherwise, extinguishing the fire with all curses end wouldn't have been so easy. Even so, the hasty casting of the spell took a toll on Fire Ash Snake. The powerful instant casting left his hands and feet sore, and green smoke still rose from his body, baked by the residual heat of the fierce fire. At the same time, Fire Ash Snake glared angrily at Nangdubao behind him. This idiot, didn't he see that the person in front of him was mentally unstable? Why provoke a psychopath? But this was his fault. Fire Ash Snake laughed at himself. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have suggested letting Thunderbird preside over this broken assessment. Now, looking at the floor and walls of the duel hall, smoldering and in danger of melting and cracking, he felt distressed. You guys left after the fight, but who would clean up this mess in the end? Thunderbird, seeing Fire Ash Snake blocking him, didn't continue to attack. He just let out a cold snort, shook his magic wand, and extinguished Yanren. Don't be so nervous. I just wanted to test the reflexes of that trash behind you. If it came to the last moment, I would have stopped, Thunderbird sneered. Fire Ash Snake cursed inwardly. He wouldn't believe Thunderbird's nonsense. If he hadn't stopped it in time, the poison leopard would have been burnt to ashes. Maybe this guy would have taunted him, saying something like, I didn't put in much effort, but this guy died as soon as I made a move, all because of the poor strength of the poison leopard. As if reading Fire Ash Snake's thoughts, Thunderbird continued to taunt. Speaking of which, this trash really deserves to be called trash. I didn't put in much effort, but this idiot was stunned like a fool at the last moment and didn't even know how to resist. So is such a trash worthy to be the spear of the club now? To be honest, I'm a little worried about the future of the club. I hope Jinfei can give a reasonable explanation for this. As for the assessment, with the level of this trash, it was completely unqualified when I presided over the club's assessment. As for now, it's up to you. Although they were both members of the club, Thunderbird mercilessly ridiculed and, after leaving a few cold words, turned and returned to the reception room. After seeing Thunderbird leave, Fire Ash Snake finally let out a long sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Thunderbird would kill the poison leopard no matter what. No one could guess what this madman was thinking. At this moment, Nangdubao, Leopard, who had narrowly escaped death, seemed to realize the gravity of his situation. His limbs went limp, and he slumped to the ground, trembling and panting heavily. Seeing Nangbao in such a pitiful state, Huohui Snake couldn't help but glance at him contemptuously. However, he quickly adjusted his demeanor and said in a relaxed tone, Congratulations, Nangdubao. You have successfully passed the authority assessment. You will now have access to the club's third-level authority. Despite Huohui Snake's congratulations, Nangdubao felt no joy. Instead, he found the promotion notice deeply ironic. Who was that person just now? Why is his strength so terrifying? Is this the true power behind the silver spear that Jinfei mentioned? Nangdubao sighed with lingering fear and looked at Huohui Snake, hoping for answers. Background? He might be one of them, Huohui Snake chuckled. You don't need to worry too much about that guy. Usually he appears weak, but no one can defeat him. Fortunately, his activities are not in Europe. But I have to remind you, Huohui Snake's tone suddenly became serious. That guy wasn't bluffing. He didn't use his full strength just now, or rather, he didn't even put in much effort. So if you have nothing to do, don't provoke him. If you die at his hands someday, don't blame me for not warning you. That bastard is not in his right mind. He can do anything. Frightened by Huohui Snake's words, Nangdubao swallowed hard and staggered to his feet. He nodded solemnly to Huohui Snake. After the recent battle, he was genuinely scared. The overwhelming power he had faced made him feel insignificant. He never wanted to experience that feeling of being crushed and powerless again. Seeing Nangdubao's reaction, Huohui Snake nodded in approval. Although it was risky to let Thunderbird lead the assessment, the effect was surprisingly good. It made these proud newcomers more humble. Nangdubao, who had been arrogant before, now looked as meek as a quail. To make these guys obedient, they needed to see absolute strength, not just be lured by prophets like Jinfei did. After sending Nangdubao away, Huohui Snake returned to the living room. Thunderbird hadn't given him the potion and door key he wanted. When he saw Thunderbird lounging on the sofa, he couldn't help but tease. That guy was really scared by you. You should have seen his reaction. It's a pity. I think he almost wet himself. That's what he deserved, Thunderbird snorted coldly. He then looked at Huohui Snake. The short spear with second-level authority has the spell of Spinning Ice Storm, plus the default spear qualification. I don't know what Rune Snake and Golden Snidget are planning, but it's somewhat against the rules. Huohui Snake was a bit embarrassed by Thunderbird's questioning. Actually, I'm not very clear on how Sacron Leopard got Spinning Ice Storm. You'd have to ask them for details. Then arrange a Changfeng meeting as soon as possible. If possible, I would like to meet Rune Snake. It's best for me to verify his intentions, Thunderbird said coldly. Huohui Snake understood that Thunderbird was questioning Jin Snidget's actions and even doubting whether the current actions were personally instructed by the leader. The whereabouts of Rune Snake were unpredictable, and the communication channel with him had always been monopolized by Jin Snidget. Now, The rune snake had not appeared for a long time, and no one knew if the golden snidget had fabricated stories during this period. In fact, the fire ash snake was also a bit confused. Although the headquarters strategy had been very successful in recent years, if the current plan and goals could be achieved, the club's income would indeed be substantial. However, the rune snake's constant absence made everyone uneasy. Understood, I will convey your request to the golden snidget. Regardless of the outcome, I will inform you using a mask, the fire ash snake said in a calm tone. Thunderbird was surprised by these words, recognizing the underlying message. In the past, whether it was a request for a long-term meeting or a meeting with the rune snake, the golden snidget usually handled the notifications. The fire ash snake typically did not involve himself in club affairs, and contacting other members privately was considered a breach of protocol. It seemed he also had doubts and dissatisfaction with the golden snidget's current actions. Was he reaching out to express his support for Thunderbird? Anduin nodded to himself, realizing that Thunderbird was right. Everyone in the Silver Spear had their own agendas. This is the best way. I will initiate an inquiry to the golden snidget. Hurry up and give me what I want. I will stay in Germany for the near future. You can send me a message at any time, Thunderbird said, implying that he would take the lead and that those willing to support him should contact him. No problem. Wait a moment, the fire ash snake replied, giving Thunderbird a deep look before walking through the side door of the living room. It seemed that being straightforward had its advantages. If everyone were as direct as Thunderbird, there would be no need for constant paranoia, the fire ash snake thought silently. Meanwhile, Anduin was also watching the fire ash snake's back. Apart from contemplating the complex interpersonal relationships within the club, he was intrigued by the fire ash snake. In the previous battle, the fire ash snake had suddenly appeared in front of his blade from the side, and Anduin was certain he hadn't used apparition. He had keenly sensed the afterimage of the fire ash snake's movement with his magical perception, which meant the fire ash snake had moved at an incredibly fast speed, almost as if he had apparated. End of this chapter. Chapter 472, Raid Plan. It seems that this fire ash snake is not as simple as it appears. In the information provided by Thunderbird, there was no mention of the fire ash snake possessing such unique skills. Perhaps the two short spears stationed at the headquarters year-round have their own special methods. Anduin's interest in the Silver Spear headquarters is growing. After receiving the port key and the potion from the fire ash snake, Anduin left the headquarters. His impersonation of Thunderbird was quite successful, and he gained a lot of valuable information. It can now be concluded that several directors in the German Ministry of Magic are likely connected to the club, with a high probability that they are the three directors who sided with Minister Pete. The lure for these directors to join is most likely the undead medicine. Otherwise, there would be no need to promise them the status of spears without any assignments. According to the club's rules, the biggest difference between a long spear and a short spear is not just the authority of the branch chief, but also access to information and channels to obtain the elixir. It seems that due to the gradual expansion of Silver Spear's ambitions, their current behavior is much more radical than before, deviating from the style of the Golden Snidgets. In the past, the club and the Golden Snidgets focused on stability, concealment, and safety. Time has indeed changed their thinking. These old immortals seem unwilling to continue hiding in the shadows. However, the more aggressive behavior of the Silver Spear has also exposed many flaws. Anduin already had a plan for his next move. After returning to his residence, Anduin opened his magic suitcase. The suitcase he crafted, limited by the weight of the LeMay alloy, was not as luxurious as Newt's, but still had nearly tens of thousands of square meters of space inside. In addition to assembling his own laboratory and residence, Anduin reserved a space the size of several fall fields. Now he intended to use these open spaces. He planned to take the initiative and raid the magical animal breeding bases of several clubs in Germany. Although Anduin didn't know how many magical animals were consumed by the runes to refine the elixir, he discovered from the fire ash snake, who had some inside information, that the number of magical animals smuggled from the outside world was not enough for sustainable development. They had even begun to consume their stock. Indeed, there was a strategy for sustainable development within the Silver Spear, originally proposed by Golden Snidget. After learning about the elixir, he quickly suggested establishing their own base for magical animals, specializing in raising and breeding them. He knew that magical animals are not like weeds that grow back after being cut. The policies of various countries on poaching and smuggling of magical animals would likely become stricter as their smuggling frequency increased. Therefore, the number of smuggled magical animals could not increase indefinitely and would eventually reach an extreme value, becoming difficult due to the Ministry of Magic's crackdown. In Germany and France, where the club first carried out smuggling activities, the magical animals hunted from these two countries were initially enough to support the consumption of all the spears of the club. But as their smuggling behavior became more reckless, it soon aroused the vigilance of the local Ministry of Magic, which began to crack down on smuggling crimes and set up special magical animal protection parks, where the Ministry of Magic equipped. The powerful guards and their strength even extended to covering the coast with a monitoring circle, strengthening the border defense along the coastline. This is why the club never considered directly landing smuggled goods from the Americas on the coasts of Germany and France. For instance, in the UK, to conserve energy, the Ministry of Magic generally refrains from expanding the monitoring circle to the west of the island of Ireland, where there is minimal wizarding activity. Even if they were not frugal with their magic, if Britain insisted on expanding the detection magic to cover the entire territory, the magic circle would even extend to parts of northern France. This would not only be a waste of resources, but also involve diplomatic issues due to unauthorized detection of other countries. Therefore, even though Minister Budnow knew there was a silver spear within the territory, he never considered using detection magic to monitor other countries to deal with smuggling. This is why the Silver Spear regarded Britain as an excellent transshipment port at the time. However, relying solely on obtaining magical animal resources from outside is inherently unstable. Thus, Jinphasia began building a breeding base very early on. Over the years, as Anduin learned from Thunderbird, the Silver Spear established 3 large breeding bases in Germany. Smuggled magical animals, except for those sold, are placed in these breeding bases. They receive good care to ensure they are strong and healthy. Pairs of magical animals are allowed to breed, and young magical animals are nurtured until they reach maturity. This is why Anduin was not in a hurry to rescue the young Thunderbird, despite forming a telepathic connection with it, because he knew it was safe for the time being. According to Jinphasia's vision, the club could achieve self-sufficiency by relying on these magical zoo areas. Adult magical animals would breed naturally, young ones would be raised slowly, and old or unpaired ones would be provided to Rune Snake Pharmacy. His idea was sound. If the breeding base could more than double within 20 years, sustainable development might be achievable. In addition to expanding resources, Jinphasia also considered cost control. Early on, the Golden Snidget strictly controlled the consumption of elixirs. Apart from increasing branches and necessary dispatches, the club rarely increased the number of spears to reduce supply. However, looking at the club's current strategy, Anduin estimated that at least 3 spears would be added suddenly in a short period, increasing the demand for magical animals. If the number of smuggled magical animals was sufficient, supplying 3 more spears would be no problem, and there would be no need to deplete the breeding base's stock. But with the transportation route in England blocked and magical animals from America undeliverable, the club would likely be forced to use the breeding park's resources prematurely. The club reserves magical animals from 3 breeding bases, which could supply the Silver Spear for a few years. But if these breeding bases were depleted, the club would face a dire situation. This was Anduin's plan, to wipe out all the Silver Spear's bases. This strategy had several advantages. Firstly, it would create chaos within the Silver Spear. The spears in the club lacked trust in each other, and the destruction of the breeding park would directly threaten their lives, exacerbating the rift between them. This is why Anduin despised those Silver Spear members for relying on elixirs. To extend their lives, wizards have resorted to using a particular kind of elixir that transforms the vitality of magical animals into their own. Without a steady supply of these magical creatures, their lifeline would be cut off. In such a scenario, the members of the Silver Spear might even resort to active throttling to secure the elixir for themselves, potentially igniting another civil war within their ranks. Even if it doesn't come to that, Anduin could still exploit the situation. Known as a lunatic within the club, he could stir up trouble, causing internal strife and possibly splitting the organization from within. Additionally, this chaos could force the elusive rune snake, who has been hiding behind the scenes, to reveal himself. Anduin's primary goal in coming to Germany was to capture this elusive figure, and a major crisis within the club might be the perfect opportunity to track him down. However, the plan to raid the breeding bases was easier said than done. There were 3 large breeding bases, each comparable in size to the magical zoo area in Scamander's house, and each housing a significant number of magical animals. Anduin's space suitcase, no matter how much it was stuffed, could only hold the contents of 1 base, let alone 3. Therefore, this operation couldn't be carried out by Anduin and his party alone. They needed a substantial number of helpers. When attacking one of the breeding bases, even with various jammers deployed to prevent news from leaking out, it wouldn't stay hidden for long. Once the attack was discovered, the other 2 bases would likely be transferred or reinforced. Thus, the key to this plan was speed. The efficiency of destroying the enemy, shipping, and moving had to be maximized. As for why they didn't divide their forces to raid all 3 bases simultaneously, Anduin had his reasons. It was too risky. They weren't just dealing with 3 smuggler dens, but 3 large parks breeding magical animals, many of which were very dangerous. To transport more than a dozen magical animals, the Silver Spear had to deploy over 100 smugglers. This wasn't just for defense, but also to prevent high-risk magical animals from running wild, which required a lot of manpower. In such a scenario, the most dangerous threats weren't the wizards, but the magical creatures themselves. Nomaber, Chapter 473. Crouching Anduin couldn't explain to others how he knew about the 3 breeding bases of Silver Spear. He had only been in Germany for a few days. One of the breeding bases could be attributed to his telepathic connection with the little Thunderbird, but discovering the other 2 with such ease was, frankly, shocking. His plan was to first gather manpower to raid the initial base. From there, he intended to extract the locations of the other 2 bases from the minds of the guards. This way, subsequent raids would follow logically. Why was Anduin so confident that someone at the first base would know the addresses of the other 2? He didn't care if they did or not. If necessary, he could fabricate memories. It wouldn't be the first time he had done such a thing. Although the plan was set, the specifics still required detailed planning. For instance, they needed to scout the breeding sites to determine the defense manpower, the size of the base, and the approximate number of magical animals. They also needed to prepare enough hypnotic potions to subdue the magical animals, and enough jammers to cover the breeding base. Additionally, it was crucial to determine the general whereabouts of the Silver Spears in advance to avoid accidents during the raid. Anduin listed a planning calendar on parchment and wrote a secret letter to Newt in England. In the letter, he mentioned that he had found the little Thunderbird and a large number of magical animals. He asked Newt to prepare a large number of potions and recruit people to be ready for his call. After sending the letter, Anduin began to debug the magic monitor, linking the surveillance screens of the Silver Spear headquarters and the residences of Phoenix, Shape-Shifting Lizard, and Golden Snidget. Surveillance and waiting were tedious but necessary tasks. At that moment, there were no clues in any of the surveillance images, including the Silver Spear headquarters, which concerned him the most. Fortunately, Anduin confirmed that the surveillance spider he had secretly placed in the living room of the Silver Spear headquarters was working correctly. The living room was empty, and Ash Snake was nowhere to be seen. Anduin patiently sat in front of the monitor, waiting quietly. After 2 or 3 hours, there was finally some movement in the living room. The door leading to the duel hall opened, and Fire Ash Snake walked in, stretching and mumbling. Although the transmitted voice was slightly distorted, it was clear enough through the monitoring spider. "It's really troublesome. I have to clean up the mess for those two idiots. I'm exhausted," Fire Ash Snake muttered, clearly dissatisfied. From his muttering, Anduin understood that Fire Ash Snake had been repairing the duel hall. Despite the hall being magically reinforced, Fierce Fire's attack had caused significant damage, requiring considerable effort to repair. Finally alone, Fire Ash Snake continued to complain about the Thunderbird and the Poison Leopard. Soon, he took off his mask, revealing his face. The Fire Ash Snake's mask was intricately designed, and he appeared to be under 30 years old. He had short hair, and his mouth was perpetually curled into a smirk, giving him an air of nonchalance. Anduin nodded to himself, convinced that this man must have consumed the elixir. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to maintain such a youthful appearance. However, what puzzled Anduin was that, as a full-time Silver Spear stationed at the headquarters, the Fire Ash Snake rarely left his post. His whereabouts were among the most predictable. Wasn't he concerned about his snake's molting period? Could he be under someone else's control? It was well known that other Silver Spears who had taken the elixir preferred to remain hidden, rarely showing their faces throughout the year, much like the phoenix they had been monitoring for days without seeing its true form. In contrast, the Fire Ash Snake's movements were transparent to all the spears. If a Silver Spear wanted to target him, it wouldn't be difficult to discover his molting period. This left Anduin baffled. He had two theories. The first was that the Fire Ash Snake had a way to ensure absolute safety during his molting period, but this seemed unlikely since his residence at the headquarters appeared unremarkable. The second theory was that his molting stage was no longer a secret, and he had entrusted his safety to others. Anduin speculated that this was his secret, which could explain why he was so trusted, able to control the entrance and exit of the headquarters, and had the authority to guard the headquarters' database and material warehouse. It suggested that he was long controlled by others, with his life and death entirely in their hands. So who holds the secret of the Fire Ash Snake? The Golden Snidget or the Rune Snake? Anduin pondered. No matter who it is, it's strange for him to give me hints. He recalled what the Fire Ash Snake had said to him before he left. Is he testing me for the Snidget or the Rune Snake? Or does he harbor his own rebellious thoughts, not wanting to be controlled anymore? Anduin shook his head, unable to find a reasonable answer. He realized that the Ash Snake might not be as straightforward as he seemed, and his actions were likely ordered by others, or he had his own agenda. As Anduin mulled over these thoughts, he squatted in front of the monitor, and before he knew it, night had fallen. The Fire Ash Snake, whom he had been observing for a long time, demonstrated how he survived in a completely enclosed space. This man had a strong sense of self-entertainment. He read a book for a while, drank some wine, and eventually took out a magical phonograph to listen to music. Anduin was surprised to see that his products had made their way into the Silver Spear's possession. While watching the Fire Ash Snake entertain himself, the man on the monitor suddenly seemed to sense something. He stopped abruptly, put away the phonograph, donned his mask, and left the living room. When he reappeared, another masked man was with him. It seemed another Silver Spear had visited the headquarters. Seeing this, Anduin's interest was piqued. He quickly turned up the monitoring volume, ready to eavesdrop on their conversation. Why do I always feel that something is off since I returned to the headquarters this time? The newly arrived Silver Spear asked, finding a place to sit in the living room. Hey, you noticed? I thought I cleaned up quite well, the Ash Snake sneered. Isn't it because of that Poison Leopard? Feeling uneasy? Anduin quickly realized that the newly arrived Silver Spear was the Golden Snidget. Poison Leopard? He came. Is he participating in the authority assessment today? With his current strength, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Jin Fei Xia asked, looking at Huohui Snake with some confusion. Heh, it's really bad luck for him to choose today of all days for the assessment. Thunderbird is here today. He said he wanted to recall the feeling of hosting the assessment, and then... Huohui Snake trailed off, recounting the events that had transpired earlier. Thunderbird, why is that guy here? This lunatic is really reckless. He dared to set fire to the headquarters. Isn't he afraid of burning this place down? Jinfacia shook his head in exasperation. Hearing that Jinfacia wanted to divert the conversation to Thunderbird, Huohui Snake immediately refused to let it slide. Don't change the subject. Can you explain why the poison leopard has the spell Spinning Ice Storm? This spell is only available after obtaining 3rd level authority. If he hadn't used it during the assessment, Thunderbird wouldn't be so angry. Jinfacia looked a bit embarrassed. I know it's against the rules, but to make these guys completely loyal to us, we need to be flexible sometimes. Besides, Nang Dubao already has 2nd level authority. I just taught him a spell a bit earlier, but I clearly told him not to use it in critical situations. Who knew? Who knew he would get so angry after being teased by Thunderbird, right? Huohui Snake snorted coldly. I still stand by my previous point. These guys are not completely trustworthy. They see the club as a training ground for learning advanced spells. I know that too, which is why I was so eager to make them our pawns. Once they drink the elixir, they won't even think about leaving the club. Jinfacia nodded in agreement, then added, I understand your point, but the rules must not be broken. This is what you established back then. It seems you're not as principled as you used to be. Huohui Snake sighed helplessly. Maybe I was a bit too anxious. I know the rules cannot be broken, so I thought of a way to improve their strength. But it's clear that the assessments they need to go through are still indispensable. Next, the ghoul and Vodibats will also participate in the 3rd level authority assessment, so we should enforce the standards strictly, Jinfacia conceded. The dialogue between Jinfacia and Huohui Snake didn't resemble a conversation between a superior and a subordinate at all. It was more like a discussion between colleagues of equal standing. End of this chapter. Chapter 474. The Golden Snidget appears. It's good that you have a clear mind about this. It's not entirely bad for Thunderbird to participate in the assessment. It's a pity you weren't here today. You missed seeing how terrified the poisonous leopard was. I bet he'll have nightmares tonight, Huohui Snake said, his tone becoming frivolous after a brief moment of seriousness. That guy just doesn't know how to attack. Jinfacia shook his head, helplessly. But it's also good to deter him, so he doesn't hesitate in future actions. But you haven't told me clearly yet. Why did Thunderbird suddenly appear? Didn't he come here 4 months ago? Has something changed in the UK? Hehe, the changes are significant, Huohui Snake sneered. Thunderbird made it clear today that the British branch can no longer be established, and the transfer station strategy has been declared a failure. He plans to withdraw from the UK soon. He even asked me for a set of port keys to and from America. It seems he has given up entirely. What? Golden Snidget's reaction mirrored that of the Fire Ash Snake. He straightened up, disbelief evident in his voice. How could this happen so suddenly? What happened in England? I asked him, but do you think he told me? You know what kind of person he is. Ash Snake shrugged helplessly. Hey. Jinfacia realized the truth. With Thunderbird's tough personality, he would never admit defeat lightly, nor would he willingly reveal his failures to others. No wonder there hasn't been a single transshipment from the UK for so long. It seems Thunderbird must have encountered strong resistance there. The situation in the UK is more complicated than expected. I thought the war there had just ended, and the Ministry of Magic wouldn't have the energy to prevent smuggling. Jinfacia did not blame or complain about Thunderbird. Thunderbird's contributions to the club were evident to all. Moreover, Thunderbird was currently the most powerful spear among the Silver Spears. If even he couldn't solve the problem, replacing him with someone else might yield even worse results. But regardless of what happened in the UK, Thunderbird has to make a complete report. After all, the club has already lost 5 Silver Spears in the UK. Such a serious loss cannot be ignored, Jinfacia said, adopting a businesslike tone. That's what I told him too, Huohui Snake nodded. He understands the seriousness of the matter, so he hopes to hold a Changfeng meeting to publicly report on his work and propose a meeting with Niven Snake. Holding a meeting is not a problem. After all, the British transfer station has affected the club's long-term strategy. but if he wants to meet the leader. Jin Feixia hesitated. I can convey his request, but given the failure of the British affairs, the Rune Snake may not be willing to see him. Anyway, I've conveyed what needed to be conveyed. What should be done next is for you to consider, Fire Ash Snake said indifferently. Jin Feixia nodded, then got up and paced back and forth a few times before looking at the Fire Ash Snake. I can agree to the Changfeng meeting now and confirm that it will be held at the beginning of next month. We'll release the news. The key now is what the club should do next after the British strategy has been blocked. Why? Do you want to open up a new battlefield or speed up the progress here? Huohui Snake looked at Jin Feixia with great interest. He didn't like to think, but he was curious about Jin Feixia's plans. Jin Feixia was worried, and he knew why. To be honest, the speed of progress here is already quite fast. We've even promoted a few more spears in a short period of time. If we speed up any further, the risk will be too great. We can't afford to do that unless absolutely necessary. Jin Feixia shook his head hesitantly. So what do you suggest? Well, it seems we need to explore other solutions first. The goods supplied by several branches in Europe are very unstable now, and we must find new sources, the Fire Ash Snake replied. Jin Feixia understood what the Fire Ash Snake was implying and nodded slightly. Do you think we should start from the north or focus on the east? He asked, deep in thought. This needs careful consideration. Let's discuss it together at the Changfeng meeting. Fortunately, we don't have to rush. The current reserves at the breeding base are sufficient, and we still have plenty of time, Jin Feixia said after a moment of contemplation. I understand, the Fire Ash Snake nodded. But for this Changfeng meeting, are you planning to let the newcomers participate? It could be a good opportunity to show them the club's strength. Jin Feixia immediately shook his head. Are you kidding? They aren't spears yet. Even if they are promoted, they won't be trusted until they drink the elixir. Oh, so you know they aren't trustworthy. I was too worried, the Fire Ash Snake said, feigning surprise. This kind of temptation is meaningless. Just focus on your job. Jin Feixia snorted, clearly dissatisfied. Got it. I'm sorry, my bad, the Fire Ash Snake said, waving his hand dismissively, though it was unclear how much he actually listened to Jin Feixia's words. After a few more words, Jin Feixia took some funds from the material warehouse and left the headquarters. Anduin, who had been silently observing the conversation between the two silver spears, began to process the information he had gathered. From the conversation between the Fire Ash Snake and Jin Feixia, it seems that Jin Feixia hasn't fully mastered the Fire Ash Snake's transformation period. There's clearly a lack of trust between them, Anduin thought. My guess appears to be correct. The club's current supply of magical animals is tight, relying heavily on the breeding base. As for the north, east, and local areas they mentioned, it likely refers to whether the next strategic direction should be to open up the market in Northern Europe or Eastern Europe, or to accelerate the division of Germany. Indeed, splitting Germany as a long-term strategy could benefit the club significantly. However, given that the division of Germany has reached a critical moment, any rash advances could lead to disastrous consequences, worse than losing the British transit station. The ideal situation would be to complete the division of Germany within the next 5 to 10 years. The high-level individuals supported by the Silver Spear should then control one of the countries, preferably West Germany, due to its proximity to the sea. Controlling West Germany would also solve the transportation problem of fantastic beasts to America. Currently, the focus should be on establishing a supply route for magical animals from Northern or Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe is rich in magical animal resources, while Northern Europe, being close to the sea, can receive goods transported from the Americas outside of winter. Each has its own advantages. However, there are corresponding risks. Wizards in Eastern Europe are too exclusive and aggressive, making it difficult to develop partners in the short term. In Northern Europe, there's the Pure Land Society, and the club has lost several silver spears there over the years. If I were the Golden Snidget, Anduin mused, considering the complexities of their situation, I might still choose the north as a breakthrough point, Anduin mused, putting himself in the perspective of the Golden Snidget to make the most favorable judgment for the development of the silver spear. The magical animal resources in Eastern Europe are indeed an undeveloped treasure trove, but the region requires infiltration, elimination of resistance, development of partners, hunting, and transportation. Going through such a standard smuggling process would be a waste of time, and it may take several years for the Eastern European branch to truly take shape. Moreover, the reason they hadn't established a branch there before was due to the significant resistance encountered, meaning benefits wouldn't be seen for a while. Northern Europe, on the other hand, presents a different scenario. Although the resistance there might be greater than in Eastern Europe, there is a quicker way to realize gains, especially since it's summer. Even temporary transport routes can be costly for a club. Therefore, in an emergency, using Northern Europe as a breakthrough point is more efficient. They wouldn't even need to establish a Nordic branch, just set up a temporary transportation route. Once the split is done, they can proceed. After sorting through the existing information and pondering for a while, Anduin had a basic prototype of the silver spear in his mind. The current development of the club is still stable, and Anduin's task is to disrupt this stability. Following the steps one by one, he has no chance to fish in troubled waters. After spending a few more hours sorting out the clues, Hogg and Shaltir, who had been out on guard duty, returned to the residence. Hogg brought shocking news to Anduin. "What? You mean you were with Pete all day today and didn't let him out of your sight? Are you sure the golden snidget was still with him at that time?" Anduin asked, looking at Hogg with surprise. Hogg, not understanding Anduin's sudden reaction, reported truthfully, "That's right. The golden snidget, or rather, Minister Pete, has always been under my watch. He went out today to meet with several administrators of non-governmental organizations, including Milan Claremont, whom Feng mentioned. Pete was not swapped." "This is interesting," Anduin muttered to himself, falling into deep thought once again. End of this chapter. Chapter 475, Night Detective. You must understand, just a few hours ago, I saw Jin Snidget visit the Silver Spear headquarters. Yet Hogg claimed he had been watching Jin Snidget for the entire day. This implies that when Jin Snidget entered the club, there was another person outside wearing a Jin Snidget mask. In other words, there were two Jin Snidgets at that time. This raises an important question. Are both of these Jin Snidgets real, or is one of them a counterfeit? The first thing that came to Anduin's mind upon learning this information was a particular item, the Time Turner. The Time Turner is a magical device for time travel, resembling an hourglass on a necklace. Each turn of the device sends the user back 1 hour in time. Typically, the user can only go back up to 5 hours, as exceeding this limit can result in serious time-related accidents. Although Anduin is fascinated by time-related magic and alchemy, he is not reckless. Time-related magic is inherently unstable, and violating the time code can have catastrophic consequences. Without sufficient knowledge, researching this kind of magic is akin to suicide. Therefore, Anduin knows little about it. However, he speculates that such a device could allow a person to appear in two places simultaneously. This could explain why the other party dared to appear so openly. If the German Ministry of Magic possessed such equipment, Peter, as a minister, might have had access to it. But is this really the case? Anduin is uncertain, as there are too many unanswered questions. For instance, did Pete have the opportunity to obtain a time turner before he joined the Ministry of Magic, given his frequent political activities? Additionally, although the Silver Spears have an almost unlimited lifespan, is it worth the risk of using unstable time magic for many years? A slight mistake could lead to disaster. There have been instances in history where wizards mistakenly killed their past or future selves using the hour reversal charm. Shaking his head in frustration, Anduin realized he couldn't figure it out just yet. There were too few clues. However, today's discovery provided him with more possibilities. Whether Pete and Jin Snidget are the same person, or one of them is a fake, Anduin dared not act rashly. If the opponent truly had a time turner, he would not only be fighting a silver spear, but might also be overwhelmed by multiple versions of the same person. For now, Anduin decided to stick to his original plan and look for opportunities to uncover Jin Snidget's true identity in the future. With a clear mind, Anduin turned to the two people beside him. We can't rest yet. Hog, you stay here and keep an eye on the house and the surveillance. Shaltair, you're coming with me. We have work to do tonight. Okay, finally, it's time for me to shine. I've been bored to death these past few days. Shaltair grinned happily, always eager for action. My lord, do you have a new plan? Hog asked, knowing from experience that Anduin was about to stir up trouble. Yes, I'll explain later. Keep an eye on the surveillance. I've successfully deployed surveillance spiders at the Silver Spear headquarters today. Record any changes and conversations, Anduin instructed. Long-term monitoring was essential, and the more information they collected, the more certain their next move would be. No problem. Leave it to me. I'm an expert in surveillance, Hog said proudly, recalling his reputation as the monitoring dog back in the day. Hearing Hog's confidence, Anduin couldn't help but feel reassured. Anduin chuckled, recalling the miraculous operation he had witnessed involving a dog 2 years ago. After chatting for a while, he didn't waste any time and immediately apparated, disappearing with Shaltair. When they reappeared, they found themselves in a large forest in the northeast of Cologne, West Germany, within a nature reserve in the Muggle world. This area also concealed one of the magical animal breeding bases of the Silver Spear. My lord, is there really a breeding base in this dense jungle? I've been flying around for a while and haven't found anything, Shaltair muttered in dissatisfaction as she landed, having just transformed back from her bat form. She had circled the mountainous area several times, but saw nothing but trees and stones, not even a hint of fire. That's normal. No one would reveal their territory so openly. Of course, it's hidden by magic, Anduin replied, squatting on the ground with a Muggle-bought map spread out in front of him. He was comparing the map with their current surroundings while responding to Shaltair's complaints. If that's the case, why did you send me to scout? Wasn't it a waste of effort? Shaltair grumbled, pouting in dissatisfaction. I asked you to scout, not necessarily to find the target, Anduin said, glancing at Shaltair. He then pointed to a spot on the map. If the map is accurate, there should be a large depression to the east of our current location. Did you see it? Depression? Shaltair turned her head, recalling her flight, and nodded. Yes, it's about 20 kilometers away. Is that where we're headed? Exactly. That's our destination, and it's in the same direction where I sensed the little Thunderbird, Anduin confirmed. Since he had successfully created desolation and experienced the baptism of thunder and lightning, his spiritual connection with Thunderbird had strengthened significantly. Since arriving in Germany, he could vaguely feel a life form very close to him, constantly calling out. However, this telepathy wasn't as precise as Newt had described. It wasn't like a compass that could pinpoint exact locations. Anduin felt that his connection with Thunderbird was being disturbed, resulting in a very weak link. Relying solely on this mental connection, he couldn't determine the exact location. In Berlin, he could only sense a general direction to the west. Even now, at such a close distance, the connection hadn't strengthened much, and it was weaker than his connection with the adult Thunderbird back in England. Based on this, Anduin guessed that the protective measures at this breeding base were quite extraordinary. This was expected, as these bases were the lifeline of the club and warranted extreme caution. The address had been provided to him by Thunderbird, but it was only a verbal description, making it difficult to find immediately. By combining Thunderbird's information with his own senses, he had located the target. Despite being only 20 kilometers away, Anduin chose not to apparat or fly directly with Shaltair. The intermittent connection with the little Thunderbird made him cautious. He believed that if he were to build such a base, he would set up a wide perimeter, possibly extending 5 to 10 kilometers outward. Thus, Anduin led Shaltair to walk slowly towards their target location, taking careful steps to avoid any potential traps or alarms. At the same time, Anduin asked Shaltair to carry the tactical map launcher on her back. He held the map in his hand, constantly scanning the surrounding environment with the Echo Curse. Both of them wore feedback cloaks. This piece of equipment could avoid being directly scanned by some warning magic, akin to putting an anti-radar coating on the body. Additionally, it would react when detected by induction magic, helping to determine the warning line distance. Although Shaltair looked reluctant, she could only follow Anduin towards the depression step by step. What made her even more frustrated was that Anduin didn't seem embarrassed at all when ordering her to work. Not only did she have to accompany Anduin up the mountain, but she also had to carry a heavy metal pole on her back. Meanwhile, Anduin, besides dragging a three-dimensional map that accepted the echo spell, seemed to be on a leisurely outing. Shaltair couldn't help but grumble and complain along the way. However, her complaints were short-lived. Suddenly, Shaltair felt the feedback cloak on her body vibrate slightly, and a layer of faint magic lines appeared on its surface. Why lord, what is this? Shaltair immediately looked at Anduin. It's a trigger warning spell. It seems we've reached the outer edge of the protective circle, Anduin replied, noticing the change as well. He was a bit surprised because they had only walked 8 kilometers in, which meant the base had set up a cordon 12 kilometers away. Every additional kilometer in the outer ring significantly increased the area to be covered, doubling the cost. The extensive coverage area indicated that the Silver Spear was indeed wealthy and powerful. From here on, we need to be more cautious. To cover such a large warning area, there must be a magic node nearby. Try to find it. There may be wizards or magical creatures patrolling around, Anduin reminded Shaltair with a solemn expression. End of this chapter. Chapter 476, Familiar Equipment. Yes, my lord, Shaltair responded, her demeanor now more serious. She hadn't expected to enter the base's security range so quickly. Fortunately, Anduin had been cautious enough. Otherwise, they might have stumbled into a trap. My lord, do you think there will be a second cordon? The protection here seems quite extensive, Shaltair asked nervously, after carefully scouting the area. I don't rule out that possibility. The deeper we go, the more complex and formidable the defenses are likely to become, Anduin replied. He didn't believe that this breeding base would rely solely on ordinary warning spells. These spells are sensitive to magic power and can detect strong life reactions. Wizards typically use them at home to prevent theft, but their effectiveness is often criticized. However, casting such a large-scale warning spell requires a substantial supply of magic power, suggesting that more sophisticated detection methods might be in place. My lord, look at that, Shaltair, who was on high alert, pointed to a large tree not far away, whispering excitedly. I see it. This should be the outermost protective node, Anduin said, moving closer to inspect it calmly despite Shaltair's excitement. Inside the tree hole, a palm-sized magic pattern was flashing. Anduin recognized it immediately as a combination of warning curse and muggle-repelling curse runes. We've found the rune. The next step is to locate its energy supply, Anduin said, handing the tactical map to Shaltair. He then took out a magnifying glass and began searching around the rune. Soon, he discovered a pattern connecting the rune, which extended from the tree hole and led to the ground along the trunk. It's a magic channel completely connected by a Grippa alloy spreading outward from the breeding base like a spider's web through underground pipes. Although a Grippa alloy isn't very expensive, extending it over such a distance is quite an investment, Anduin remarked, impressed. He had only used the most inferior Pallasser brass for the magic pipes in his home, yet the Silver Spear had arranged pipelines over kilometers. The resources required for such an endeavor were astounding. Let's follow this magic passage. To save costs, their next node should also be connected to this pipeline, Anduin instructed, leading the way. After discovering the magic power node, he felt more confident. Since the distance from the periphery to the node was about 1 kilometer, he deduced that there would be no new security measures within the next kilometer. He gradually increased his pace. Shaltair, following behind, was slightly exasperated. She had been carrying a launch stick earlier, and now, because Anduin needed to explore the magic power pipeline, she also had to manage a tactical map. As expected, the next kilometer was smooth, with no new guardian magic detected. After traveling another kilometer along the magic power pipeline, they found another rune of the warning curse, indicating that the outermost warning area maintained this low intensity. After exploring another kilometer, Anduin sensed something different. This magic power fluctuation, if I'm not mistaken, it includes a mix of alarm spell, human tracking spell, and human repelling spell. Why does this fluctuation feel so familiar to me? Anduin pondered as they continued their cautious advance. Anduin cautiously took a few steps forward, then immediately retreated. After passing through the outermost 2 layers of security circles, the defensive strength increased significantly. Among the spells, the alarm spell is an enhanced version of the warning spell, designed to detect intruders more keenly and alert the guards. The human tracking spell can accurately identify humanoid creatures, while the Muggle repelling curse affects the minds of Muggles, expelling them from the area. This rune is also equipped in the outermost security circle, ensuring that within a radius of 12 kilometers, centered on the breeding base, there will be no Muggle presence. Fortunately, the outer layer of this spell is not highly sensitive. If they went deeper, Anduin and Shaltir would be exposed. The feedback cloak they wore could only block the alarm spell and the repelling spell, but was less effective against more sensitive spells like the human tracking spell. Prepared for this, Anduin tapped the brooch on his body, activating it and wrapping himself in a faint magical aura. This equipment was specially prepared to cover up monitoring magic, such as the human tracking curse, enchanted with the enhanced shielding charm. After using the brooch to cast a similar spell on Shaltir, the two continued forward. "My lord, this new mixed magic feels familiar," Shaltir remarked, fully on guard. "You feel it too, don't you?" "Although I'm not certain, the source of this mixed magic might be something we're familiar with," Anduin replied, noting Shaltir's keen perception. "The one we're familiar with?" Shaltir asked, confused. "I'm just guessing. We won't know for sure until we see the next magical node," Anduin said, continuing forward silently. After walking 2 kilometers along the magic pipeline, they found the next magical node, simply hidden. "Isn't this the anti-theft monitor we sell?" Shaltir exclaimed, annoyed, as she spotted a metal pole hidden in the bushes. "Indeed, I guessed right. I didn't expect this snidget to guard and steal," Anduin said, recognizing the familiar alchemy props. The anti-theft monitor is another product from Silver Flash Trading Company, launched after the tactical map, shielding jammer, and anti-apparition jammer. This monitor is sold to customers with anti-theft needs, such as Gringotts, individual merchants storing important products, and large wizard families. It is popular due to its protective nature, with a risk rating of only XXX. Although not available directly in stores, it can be ordered from Silver Flash Trading Company with Ministry of Magic approval. The other 3 poles are not for sale, and even the British Ministry of Magic has not disclosed their possession of such items. For overseas trade, XXX-level alchemy equipment is controlled by the Ministry of Magic. Foreign buyers must order directly from the British Ministry of Magic, and the ministry evaluates whether to trade. This ensures that dangerous props do not fall into the wrong hands, preventing potential trouble. It seems the Golden Snidget must have purchased it directly from the UK with assistance. The German Ministry of Magic had acquired XXX-level equipment, and if it had been purchased by an official organization, the British Ministry of Magic would not have questioned it. However, these items had somehow ended up in the hands of Silverlance, a smuggling group. "Grandma, what are those people from the Ministry of Magic doing, selling our stuff to smugglers?" Shaltir's face turned green with anger upon seeing the anti-theft monitor, and she couldn't help but curse. "Heh, there's no other way. They don't know the details of Minister Pete. If the Minister of Magic offered you something before coming to Germany, would you refuse?" It was ironic to see their own products in the hands of smugglers, and I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Humph, you're still in the mood to laugh," Shaltir glared at her heartless companion. "Since there is an anti-theft monitor here, there might be more of our equipment in Silverlance's possession. I wouldn't be surprised if the defenders at the breeding base were wearing our tactical vests." "What you said is very reasonable," Anduin replied, his smile fading. "But the price of this equipment is not cheap. They must have paid double the price to get it. If the second layer cordon is fully equipped with anti-theft monitors, it would be a significant expense. Not to mention, the club has 2 other breeding bases. If they are similarly equipped, do they have the money to buy other things?" This, Shaltir pondered for a moment. It seemed plausible. Since the Ministry of Magic obtained the Supervi Scion rights of XXX-level products from Silver Flash Trading Company, they had monopolized the foreign trade of such products. Now, high-level officials in the Ministry of Magic were acting like unscrupulous businessmen. Whenever they had the opportunity to travel abroad, they would sell these products aggressively. Minister Badno even set up a commission system internally. The more you sell, the more commission you get, leading to a scramble among chief and deputy directors for jobs that involve travel. Anduin was pleased with the outcome. After all, the profit margin on his products was quite high, and the sales volume of those XXX-level products was not too significant. The Ministry of Magic had essentially become Anduin's free sales force, promoting his products abroad. It was a win-win situation for him. End of this chapter. Chapter 477, Entity Shield. Speaking of which, it seems we've taken advantage of the situation, Shaltair said, a sudden realization lighting up her face. After we rob this breeding base, we can recover these anti-theft monitors, refurbish them, and sell them again. Should we let the Ministry of Magic take this opportunity to sell more? Anduin stared at her, speechless. What robbery? We're here to save those innocent magical animals. And when did you start thinking like a profiteer? Refurbish and sell? These monitors are practically new. The energy they consume is provided by the magic pipeline, and their internal energy storage is barely used. Just take them back and clean them up. What a wasteful idea. All right, enough nonsense. Let's focus on the task at hand, Anduin said, suppressing the profiteer within him. Since the security equipment here uses our products, it will be easier for us. Let's take a deeper look. Since this breeding base uses his equipment for defense, it was like a walk in the park for Anduin. He knew these devices inside out. If he got detected by his own products, it would be a disgrace. The anti-theft monitor has a detection radius of 2 kilometers, covering a 4-kilometer diameter around the center. There should be no changes in the next 2 kilometers. After leading Shaltair for another 2 kilometers, Anduin confirmed that there were no new detection methods within the last 4 kilometers of the warning area. It seemed the detection method within the 8 kilometers of the inner layer was also the anti-theft monitor. With this knowledge, Anduin and Shaltair moved towards their goal confidently. However, after traveling a short distance, Shaltair made a new discovery. "My lord, look quickly, there's movement on the map," Shaltair said, holding the tactical map. She was responsible for monitoring it constantly, scanning it every few moments. She noticed a small dot moving about 1 kilometer away from them. "Stop! Zoom in on that area and see what it is," Anduin instructed, pulling Shaltair down carefully. Previously, the 3-dimensional map in Shaltair's hands was maximized to extend the detection distance, but it wasn't very clear. Shaltair quickly manipulated the map, expanding the area where the movement occurred. They saw a wizard holding a swallow-tailed dog. It seems that as we approach the core area, there are patrolling personnel in addition to magical detection methods, Anduin observed, not too worried since the patrol was still some distance away. "My lord, look at the route of this man. It will intersect with our path later. We have a map so we can avoid the patrols, but what about that dog? We haven't eliminated our scent along the way," Shaltair said worriedly. Then, she seemed to think of something. "By the way, do you think this patrolling wizard is wearing tracking glasses? That equipment is listed in the Ministry of Magic's product catalog." "Good thinking, but I anticipated this before we came here," Anduin said, pulling out an open potion bottle. "I've been using a potion to eliminate our scent along the way, so don't worry about it." "So, my lord, you had already thought of everything," Shaltair said, impressed. Shaltair, feeling relieved by Anduin's thorough preparation, let out a sigh and smiled. "Then let's ignore the guy in front and just bypass him." "No," Anduin shook his head. "We are here to investigate. Now that we've found the patrol personnel, we must observe them and collect enough information, such as their patrol routes, frequency, timing, and the equipment they carry. This isn't just for the 2 of us. It's crucial for our later raid." "Then, shall we move closer?" Shaltair asked, scratching her head in embarrassment. "We'll use an illusion spell to get closer, ambush the patrol's path, and observe them closely. Then, using the tactical map, mark their patrol route and movement speed. This information is vital for our follow-up operations. Yes, my lord, Shaltair responded. She cast a disillusionment charm on herself and followed Anduin towards the patrolling officer. As they moved closer, they saw a faintly flickering light and occasionally heard a dog barking. Anduin and Shaltair quickly found a hiding spot to wait. As the light approached, the patrol wizard with a dog came into view. The wizard held a swallowtail dog in one hand and an oil lamp in the other, passing by their hiding spot without noticing them. Neither the dog nor the wizard showed any signs of detecting their presence, indicating that Anduin's potion was effective. From the wizard's appearance, Anduin confirmed that this was not a Silver Spear gun guard, but a collaborator of the club. He wondered whether the entire breeding base was guarded by Silver Spear gun personnel or just trusted collaborators. The patrolling wizard wore a standard, tactical vest from the Silver Flash Trading Company, but did not have any tracking glasses. After the wizard passed, Shaltair whispered urgently to Anduin, "My lord, did you see that guy wearing our tactical vest?" "Yes, that's quite surprising," Anduin nodded. He hadn't expected Jin Snidget to be so well-funded, buying numerous anti-theft monitors and still having money to equip collaborators with tactical vests. If we raid the breeding base, what should we do about these patrolling personnel? Wouldn't it be difficult to launch a sneak attack with them wearing tactical vests? If something goes wrong, it could alert the base, Shaltair said worriedly. This is indeed a problem. I think they equip the tactical vests to ensure they can send an alarm to the base if attacked, Anduin speculated. Then what should we do? Shaltair asked curiously. It's okay. There's no need to worry. Let's just move on. Anduin chuckled lightly, sounding indifferent. What? Are we just going to ignore these patrolling wizards? Shaltair pouted, dissatisfied. Hey, I stopped worrying about them once I realized they were using my equipment, Anduin sneered. I've installed back doors in these tactical vests. If I cast spells on them, they won't trigger the stress spell. What? Shaltair looked at Anduin in surprise. Does every tactical vest we sell have this back door? Why did you do this? Yes, the tactical equipment sold on the market has this back door, but I made it very subtle. It only works for me, Anduin smiled slightly. As for why I did this, it's for safety. Who knows if one day I'll face enemies wearing my equipment? If I were overwhelmed by my own gear, it would be very embarrassing. Shaltair nodded, understanding the foresight behind Anduin's actions. They continued their mission, now more confident in their ability to handle any obstacles. Shaltair teased Anduin, a hint of disbelief in her voice. I didn't expect you to think so far ahead, even considering whether your equipment will match up in the future. But I suppose it's not a bad thing to be so thorough. After briefly recording the patrolling wizards, the two continued on their way. They encountered another patrolman, similarly equipped. Once they had crossed the two patrol lines, they finally arrived at their target location. Anduin and Shaltair climbed a gentle slope, and the terrain in front of them began to descend rapidly, revealing a large basin not far from their line of sight. However, the depression before them was devoid of any human activity, save for the trees. It was clear that the area was covered by shielding magic. Can you see the internal situation on the tactical map? Anduin asked Shaltair, who was behind him, after observing the area with his probe. No, Shaltair replied, handing the map to Anduin. The area ahead is covered by a semicircular shield. Sure enough, starting from about 10 meters in front of them, the entire depression appeared on the tactical map as a large, covered area, as if a huge bowl had been placed over it. The protective barrier here can block sound waves, which means it has a physical presence, Anduin said, frowning slightly as he looked at the map. What should we do? If it has a physical shield, touching it could easily alert the people inside, Shaltair said nervously. Don't worry, Anduin reassured her. I'll go up and check first. If the situation looks bad, we'll retreat. Our first priority is to remain concealed. With that, Anduin cast a disillusionment charm on himself and moved forward cautiously. Chapter 478, The Attacking Shaltair. Anduin, standing before the semicircular protective shield, took out his monitoring magnifying glass and observed through it for a while. Carefully, he extended his right hand, stopping just before touching the magical barrier. He then closed his eyes and began to mentally perceive the composition of the protective shield. Behind him, Shaltair was not idle. She used the tactical map to carefully observe the movements around her. Anduin spent a considerable amount of time investigating, and just as Shaltair began to feel impatient, he returned to her side. "How is it, my lord? Can that protective shield be breached?" Shaltair asked, looking at Anduin with anticipation. She didn't want to retreat in defeat. Anduin shook his head. The composition of this protective shield is quite complex. It includes spells like Peace Guard, Total Protection, Shielding Curse, Anti-Apparition Curse, and Anti-Invisibility Curse, among others. It also has a stress feedback mechanism. It's a compound protective circle, and any attempt to dismantle it violently will definitely alert the enemies inside. "Ah, so we can only stand here and watch?" Shaltair said, disappointed. Then a thought struck her. "What about sneaking in from the ground? Didn't you learn the shuttle curse from Thunderbird? That spell can go through walls and burrow into the ground. We could try to go under it." "No, this magic circle leaves no loopholes for us to exploit. The protective wall even covers the ground, and our shuttle curse comes from the silver spear. They will definitely have taken precautions against it." Anduin immediately dismissed Shaltair's suggestion. But before she could show her disappointment, he added, "However, I can open a small hole in the cover without triggering the protective mechanism. It should be enough for you to pass through in bat form. In a while, you can put on the monitoring equipment and get inside to assess the situation. After an hour, I'll open another hole in the same place to let you out. I also need more time to study this protective cover. Maybe I'll find a way to break through the shield without alarming them. How about it? Do you dare to go in and explore?" "Why wouldn't I dare?" Shaltair, always bold, immediately agreed. "But what if I'm discovered? Wouldn't the people inside be surprised to see a bat suddenly appearing?" Anduin smiled. "That's why I can guarantee that I won't disturb them by making a small opening. The surveillance unit above will only notice intruders above a certain size. Small animals won't trigger the alarm when they pass by. Although the magic cover has expulsion spells, they don't cover the entire protective layer. So, it won't seem strange if a small creature slips through occasionally. As long as you don't act too abruptly, it won't arouse their suspicion. What you should worry about most is how to accurately find the direction of the exit when you return. This magic circle is more about internal protection. It's much more difficult to get out than to get in. Once you hit the protective layer of the inner wall, the magic circle will sound the alarm almost immediately, presumably to prevent magical creatures inside from escaping. Moreover, the magic circle has a disorienting effect. After entering, ordinary positioning equipment is likely to be ineffective, including a Muggle compass. I suspect this kind of magic is what caused my spiritual connection with the little Thunderbird to become weak and inaccurate. Anduin had touched the door of the breeding base, but he and the little Thunderbird still couldn't establish a proper connection. Anduin had a clear sense that the magic circle here was causing trouble. Strictly speaking, the technology behind this magic circle was actually very advanced, and it even had a strong defensive function built in. If the internal enemies were alarmed and fully activated the defensive function of the magic circle, a dozen wizards would be defeated in no time. They might not even be able to get in. At that point, the enemies inside would have enough time to react and even call for help. Although Anduin planned to use shielding jammers and communication blockers to cut off ordinary communication magic and the mass communication of the silver spear gun, high-level applications like the Patronus charm or direct communication methods, such as owls, could not be stopped. Anduin guessed that they left a gap to allow small creatures to pass through, making it easier for owls to get in and out. Then what should I do? If I'm trapped inside, wouldn't it be the end? Shaltair's face immediately turned pale upon hearing about the dangers of going in alone. So after you go in, you have to mark the entrance. You can make a simple sign on the ground that only you can recognize, Anduin suggested immediately. But the opening time I can manage is only 10 seconds at most, and the requirements for you are very high. If you fail to get out in time, we need to have some backup plans, Anduin added, dampening Shaltier's brief moment of relief. What if I really don't come out? Shaltier asked, looking at Anduin with some trepidation. She suddenly felt a bit unconfident after hearing his words. I have prepared 2 plans, Anduin said, making a V sign with his fingers. He then explained each plan in detail. The first plan is for you to live inside directly. You've seen the scope of this breeding base. The area is very large, and because of the need for confidentiality, there won't be too many defensive personnel inside. If you live and hide inside in the form of a bat, especially if you hide among other magical animals to blend in, the danger is actually not particularly high. I will call everyone to rescue you in a short time. Anduin even took out a super small tactical vest that he had prepared for Shaltier's bat form and began to stuff food and daily necessities into the space pocket of the vest. Anduin's actions made Shaltier feel uneasy, as if he had already judged that she would definitely not be able to get out. What about the second plan? The first plan sounds so scary to me. You probably want to take this opportunity to dump me, Shaltier said. Her facial features almost twisted in distress. The second plan is much simpler. If you encounter any special danger, just rush out and abandon the investigation mission. Although the internal protection of this magic circle is high, it is not turned on to maximum power. It's not enough to stop you. Although there is a risk of alarming them, breaking through the protective shield in bat form may not make them particularly vigilant. They might just think some magical animal has escaped, Anduin explained, trying to comfort Shaltier. In reality, the magic circle was very sensitive to internal protection. As long as a magical animal hit the inner wall, an alarm would be triggered, easily alerting the enemies inside. However, Anduin would not risk Shaltier's life for a reconnaissance operation. Raiding the Silver Spear breeding base was the most profitable action plan, but it was not the only one. Understood, Shaltier said, comprehending Anduin's instructions. So the best situation is to leave directly. If I can't make it in time, I should take the opportunity to hide, and if all else fails, I should flee. Is that what it means? Shaltier asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. That's right, Anduin confirmed. Once you're inside, you must install this transmitter as soon as possible. For safety, you can bury it in the ground near the magic shield. Otherwise, the internal monitoring won't be able to transmit the signal. He handed her a finger-sized metal device and carefully reminded her of its importance. He had already installed a similar transmitter in the living room of the Silver Spear headquarters. Its function was akin to a signal base station, with strong correlation and penetration between the 2 conductors, capable of bypassing most blocking magic. The only challenge was that it needed to be installed from the inside. Understood. I promise to complete the task, Shaltier replied, her playful demeanor replaced by a serious expression. She knew her role was to be Anduin's eyes, allowing him to see everything inside and respond accordingly. She also hadn't forgotten the grudge she held against the smugglers. She had suffered greatly when she was transported from the United States to the United Kingdom like cargo. Now that she had the opportunity for revenge, she was determined to seize it. Okay, let's act now, Anduin said, nodding in satisfaction. Shaltier transformed into a bat and landed on Anduin's shoulder. He carefully placed a special tactical vest on the bat. Then, Anduin approached the giant magic shield. Instead of taking out his wand, he extended his hand into the void, as if searching for something. After a moment of concentration, Anduin spoke softly. Now, fly straight forward in the direction of my finger. There's a gap there. Shaltier couldn't see any change in the shield in front of her. She realized that if Anduin said there was an opening, there must be one, even if it was invisible. She finally understood why Anduin had warned her about finding the exit to return. She couldn't even see the entrance now, but there was no time to hesitate. Shaltier used both hands and feet, rushing forward along Anduin's arm. As she touched the magic shield, it felt like air. There was the appearance of a barrier, but no tactile sensation of hitting a wall. In the blink of an eye, Shaltier felt a blur before her eyes and found herself inside the giant magic shield. End of this chapter. Chapter 479, Eavesdropping. As soon as she rushed into the protective shield, Shaltier immediately withdrew her strength and jumped up on the spot. She was afraid that she would expose herself if she rushed too hard. After entering the interior, Shaltair felt a blur in front of her eyes, and the surrounding scenery instantly became unfamiliar. Previously blocked by the barrier, she finally had the opportunity to glimpse the whole picture of this breeding base. Beneath her feet and beside her was an artificially paved stone road. This stone road continued to extend along the outermost periphery of the hemispherical protective cover, spreading in an arc to the end of her field of vision. At intervals, a fork would branch out from this circular ring road, extending towards the center of the circular base. After these roads converged inward for a certain distance, they would meet another smaller circular ring road and intersect with it. This pattern repeated every tens or hundreds of meters, making the entire breeding base look like a circular spider web or a dartboard magnified thousands of times when viewed from above. Between these roads were neatly divided animal pens. Some of the pens were completely open to the air, with the ground inside covered in soft, comfortable lawns. Although the magical animals inside seemed not in good spirits, the environment was relatively comfortable. Of course, there were still many animal pens wrapped in weather blankets, similar to what Anduin saw at Scamander's house. Not far from Shaltair's position, there was a large animal pen with 8 ream cattle. At this time, the ream cattle were staring at Shaltair, looking at each other. Perhaps they thought the bat in front of them was not a threat, so they just stared at her blankly. When Shaltair looked up into the distance, she found something that made her very speechless. At the junction of these crisscrossing roads, there were many magic lamps for lighting. Shaltair recognized at a glance that these were all products sold by Silver Flash Trading Company, and they were the cheapest standard imitation oil lamp hanging lamps. These neat rows of hanging lamps illuminated the entire base brightly. "Grandma, this crappy club is quite interesting, actually taking care of our family's business like this. But you don't know how to buy something good. You only know how to use this cheap stuff," Shaltair muttered to herself, even in the enemy's camp. But just as she had taken in her surroundings, she immediately heard footsteps and faint human voices from the side. Startled, Shaltair rushed forward with a whoosh and got directly into the stable in front of the ream cattle. The field of vision on the road was too wide, and there was nowhere to hide. After rushing into the animal pen, Shaltair immediately landed on the ground, then burrowed into the grass, even pulling down her bat ears with her claws, revealing only 2 big round eyes to observe the surrounding movement. As she nervously hid, the sound of footsteps from a distance grew louder. After a while, she saw 2 wizards passing by the animal pen side by side, chatting casually. Speaking of which, since these magic lamps were replaced a few months ago, the whole park has become much brighter. "It would be nice to use these magic lamps when we can train outside," said a man in a hunting suit, sounding bored. "Don't even think about it," the other wizard replied. "The boss said long ago that this kind of magic lamp can only be used in the park. Its light is too bright, and the shielding magic used outside is not effective enough. Using this kind of lamp will increase the risk of exposure," the robed wizard on the other side said, shaking his head. As he glanced down, he noticed his shoelaces were loose. He stopped and walked over to the front of Reem's cattle pen, stepped on the railing, and leisurely tied his shoelaces. Coincidentally, the spot where the wizard was standing was exactly where Shaltair was hiding. She was so startled by the patrolling man that she almost cried out, but she managed to cover her mouth just in time. "That's so boring. When I was patrolling outside, except for a dog, there was no one around. Don't you think it's scary to be surrounded by darkness?" The younger wizard in the hunting suit sighed, his voice tinged with a hint of nervousness. "You idiot. If you find someone around you, something big will happen," the older wizard in the long trench coat snapped, his patience wearing thin as he struggled with his shoelaces. He looked at his companion with a teasing expression. "But how old are you? Why are you still so timid and afraid of the dark? Let me tell you, going out to patrol is much more interesting than staying in this broken birdcage all the time. At least you can breathe fresh air outside. What else can you smell here except the stench of animal excrement?" He glared at the few ream cows in the pen. "I'm talking about you," Your shit stinks, and you don't even care about personal hygiene." He then looked at his companion expectantly. "Not to mention, when we go out to patrol, we can use the new equipment the boss provided." The older wizard, unshaven and looking much more rugged than his younger companion, seemed more courageous. "You're talking about that weird-looking vest?" The younger wizard curled his lips in disgust. "That thing looks so ugly. It doesn't even have any decorations. It doesn't look powerful at all. Stop bragging." Shaltair, hiding behind the railing, covered her mouth to stifle her laughter. She agreed with the younger wizard's opinion. As the chief designer of Silver Flash Trading Company, she had long been displeased with those tactical vests. She had always wanted to add some beautifying designs to them, but Anduin had strongly opposed it, insisting on practicality over aesthetics. He even painted some colorful camouflage on them, which almost made Shaltair cry. The older wizard stopped tying his shoelaces and glared fiercely at his younger companion. "You know nothing. That vest is designed for combat. The simpler and more convenient it is, the better. Adding weird decorations would just make your opponent laugh during a battle." Shaltair pouted in displeasure. If Anduin heard what this wizard said, he might make him a confidant. "And you haven't even seen it. How can you judge the equipment without trying it?" The older wizard scolded, then waved his companion over mysteriously. The younger wizard moved closer, curious. The older wizard whispered, "Let me tell you, I tried that vest secretly when it first arrived. The effect was even better than expected. If someone casts a spell on you from a hidden corner, that vest will automatically raise a human-shaped iron armor spell. With your current level of spellcasting, I will. Stand still and let me attack for half a minute, and you won't be able to break through the defense," the wizard in the Windbreaker boasted. "Really? A humanoid iron armor curse? I haven't mastered that spell yet, so the vest can cast spells automatically?" The hunting wizard looked at him in disbelief. "Of course, it's true. I saw it with my own eyes. But don't spread this around, or you'll regret it," the Windbreaker wizard warned, shaking his fist in a mock threat. "Don't worry, my lips are sealed. I didn't tell anyone about the time John stole Zizimi from the Billywig nest," the hunting wizard laughed innocently. Then, with curiosity, he asked, "You said this vest is so powerful. Where did the boss get it? I've never heard of such a thing before." The Windbreaker wizard looked at his companion, speechless. He seemed to recall something odd. Wasn't it an accident that John was bitten by the Billywig bug and floated around in the sky last time? After a moment, he responded, "Ah, you mean the vest. That piece of equipment seems to be imported. It's said to be from the same company that makes the magic lamps used in the park now, a company called Silver Flash Alchemy Development Company." "Oh, this alchemy company is so powerful that it brought all its business to West Germany?" The hunting wizard sighed with envy. "Unfortunately, we can only go out once every 6 months, and we have to delete the work in the park. Otherwise, I'd like to buy some magic lamps for my home. Tell me, what's going on outside now? We don't know anything." "Heh, you have a good idea, but even if you go out, you probably won't be able to buy it. According to the person who just came in after changing shifts, this kind of magic lamp is only sold in East Germany." The Windbreaker wizard shrugged helplessly. "Ah? Why? Is our West Germany not as good as East Germany? Why don't they sell it here? Could it be that the East Germans are playing tricks behind our backs?" The hunting wizard complained angrily. "I don't know. Once we enter this park, we're stuck here for half a year. We don't even know the weather outside. If it weren't for the generous gold galleons and the boss's guarantee, who would settle here?" The Windbreaker wizard sighed in frustration. "It would be great if we found out that West Germany has achieved independence next time we go out. Otherwise, we have to live under the same roof as those East Germans," the hunting wizard muttered angrily. "Who knows?" the Windbreaker wizard replied, curling his lips in exasperation. "Young people are easily influenced. If someone brainwashes you, you'll be fooled and lost." End of this chapter. Chapter 480, Shaltair the Reckless. "Let's go. Don't waste time. If we don't complete the patrol mission within the specified time, the boss will probably lecture us again," said the wizard in the Windbreaker, pausing after tying his shoelaces. He confirmed the tightness was just right before addressing his companion. "It's not that I want to stop, and you seem to be having a better chat," the hunting wizard replied, somewhat puzzled as he looked into the distance. "It's strange. Why has that Thunderbird suddenly quieted down? Hasn't it been very emotional these days?" "Who knows? Who can predict the temper of a magical animal like a Thunderbird? A few days ago, it suddenly became extremely excited, making noises and causing everyone to feel uneasy. It even almost escaped. But now it's quiet again. Don't you think that's odd?" The wizard in the windbreaker spat rudely to the side, curling his lips in a mutter. Maybe after 2 days in the confinement cage, it knows what's wrong and has settled down. Perhaps we can put it back in its exclusive enclosure after a couple of days. The hunting wizard shrugged indifferently. But the boss is right. This Thunderbird is enough to take care of, eating and drinking every day. That's because they want to keep it for breeding when it grows up. They always say they want to find another female ptarmigan to bring back. But after so many years, there's still only one. If you ask me, we should transport it away sooner so it doesn't scare us. If we wait for it to grow up, we might not be able to control it, the wizard in the windbreaker cursed angrily. Transport it away? Since I came to this park, except for those very old magical animals, I haven't seen them transport any of these magical animals away. If they are transported, where will they be sent? The hunting wizard looked at his senior curiously. Don't worry about it. Let's just do our job well. We can't afford to offend the boss and the people above him. Be careful asking around, or you might lose your life in the hall. The wizard in the windbreaker threatened his companion with a stern look. Che, what's so great about this? I can tell you, Sir Claremont is my uncle. I will enter the management sooner or later. I was a cadre of the West German Endeavor Society before I entered here. The hunting wizard boasted, unfazed by his companion's intimidation. Ha ha! The wizard in the windbreaker sneered at the other's bragging. Enter the management? Just you? There are many relatives of His Excellency Claremont in this park. If you're so powerful, why are you still patrolling here with me? You're just a tool man, which is really ridiculous. After casting a mocking glance at his companion, the wizard in the windbreaker walked forward, while the hunting wizard, seeing that the other didn't believe him, hurried to catch up and explain. Chalter waited until the voices of the 2 patrol officers faded completely before daring to raise her head. Although she only overheard their chatter, Chalter gathered quite a lot of information from it. First, the origins of these staff members. She heard the name His Excellency Claremont mentioned by the 2, and the West German Endeavor Society mentioned by the young wizard in the hunting suit. If she guessed correctly, this Lord Claremont should be Milan Claremont, the leader of the West German Endeavor Society mentioned by Anduin. The employees in this breeding base should all be West Germans, and most of them are likely related to the West German Endeavor Society or Milan Claremont. It seems that my lord guessed right before. These so-called non-governmental organizations in Germany have been was indeed a natural ecosystem within the protective dome, complete with birds and other small creatures. Chalter took a deep breath and steadied herself, her eyes scanning the area below. From her vantage point, she could see the entire layout of the breeding base. The various animal pens, the central administrative building, and the pathways connecting them all became clear. She noted the positions of the guards and the locations of the magical lamps that illuminated the area. This place is huge, she thought, feeling a mix of awe and determination. I need to gather as much information as possible for Lord Anduin. She carefully noted the positions of the guards and the layout of the buildings. Her eyes then fell on a large, heavily fortified structure at the center of the base. That must be where they keep the most valuable creatures, she speculated. After memorizing the layout, Chalter descended quietly, landing back in the shadows where she wouldn't be seen. She decided to place the monitoring spiders in strategic locations to gather continuous information. She carefully released the spiders, watching as they scurried off to their designated spots. With the monitoring spiders in place, Chalter felt a sense of accomplishment. This should provide Lord Anduin with the information he needs, she thought. However, she knew her mission wasn't over yet. she still needed to find a way to communicate with the little Thunderbird and possibly turn it into an ally. As she moved stealthily through the base, she kept her senses alert for any signs of the Thunderbird. She finally reached a large aviary, where she could hear the faint sounds of birds chirping. Peering inside, she saw the little Thunderbird perched on a branch, its feathers shimmering with a faint electric glow. Shaltair approached cautiously, not wanting to startle the creature. "Hello there," she whispered softly. The Thunderbird turned its head, its eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. "I know you can sense Lord Anduin," Shaltair continued in a soothing tone. "He sent me here to help you. We need to work together." The Thunderbird tilted its head as if considering her words. Then, with a soft chirp, it spread its wings and flew down to land on Shaltair's outstretched arm. She felt a surge of relief and hope. "Thank you," she whispered, gently stroking the bird's feathers. With the Thunderbird now on her side, Shaltair felt more confident about her mission. She knew that with its help, she could gather even more valuable information and possibly find a way to disrupt the operations of the breeding base. As she made her way back to her hiding spot, Shaltair couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had managed to turn a potentially dangerous situation into an opportunity. Now, all she needed to do was wait for the right moment to strike and relay the information to Lord Anduin. For now, she would remain vigilant, gathering as much intelligence as possible and preparing for the next phase of her mission. With the little Thunderbird by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. There are indeed some small holes in the mask, especially in the sky above the barrier. Occasionally, birds from outside will accidentally break in. After discovering this, Shaltair became bolder. It seemed that at night, she could move almost as she pleased. At this time, Shaltair finally had another chance to take a peek at the complete layout of the entire breeding base. The base below covered at least several hundred acres of land, resembling a small village focused on animal husbandry. The outermost space grid of the breeding base was the largest, primarily housing free-range magical animals such as reem cattle, horned camels, Tibo warthogs, rune horses, and moon-crazed animals. As the base extended inward, the grids became smaller, and not all animals were free-range. Large compartments covered with weather blankets started to appear sporadically. Interestingly, not all compartments were occupied. About 1/3 were actually empty. It was evident that Silver Spear had great ambitions, planning to build this into a permanent large-scale breeding base. In addition to the land-dwelling magical creatures, there was also a designated area for aquatic magical creatures. A conspicuous small lake in the fur, on left of Shaltair, accounted for about 20% of the entire base. Furthermore, nearly 20% of the land in the center of the breeding base was covered with houses, seemingly reserved for the residential area of the guards and caretakers. Shaltair could see a large circle of uniformly shaped houses forming a circular branch, resembling a standard staff dormitory. Outside the dormitory circle, there were houses similar to pet hospitals. These large structures were very conspicuous and likely used for treating and breeding magical animals. Several open-air fences with neat lawns were also present. In one of the fences, a few swallowtail dogs were sleeping soundly, and a few Pegasus were tied to a nearby fence. It seemed this area was specifically used for the domestication and training of magical animals. What made Shaltair particularly speechless was that this residential area was also equipped with numerous entertainment facilities. There were bars, cafes, and other places for rest and relaxation, as well as shops selling snacks, candies, and small toys. She even spotted a public library. End of this chapter.